Chapter 1034. After passing through the train station, everyone finally saw the so-called train. It was a 400-meter-long steel monster with sections that looked like a huge centipede. However, it didn't have as many legs as a centipede. What a big guy. After Chao Gui finished speaking, he started laughing. He couldn't help but let out a hee-hee sound. What's so funny? Tell me. Ma Huolong tried to make his eyes bigger, but they were only slightly bigger than peanuts. Although Shui Yuanpei was expressionless, he pricked up his ears to listen to Chao Gui's opinion. I just feel that I've seen more new things in the past few years than before. Chao Gui counted. Tractors, trucks, glass, a clock, the steam engine we saw last time, and this big fellow in front of us. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this big fellow will perform. Zhao Prince Consort. Ma Huolong said a name. Everything was brought about by this person. It could be said that this person had changed the entire Dayo and the Yun nation. Do you think there's a relationship between intelligence and hair? The dean doesn't have much hair either. Chao Gui raised an interesting point. Zhao Prince Consort doesn't have a single strand of hair, not even eyebrows. You can try. You'll be smart if you go bald. Ma Huolong encouraged. I really want to try. Chao Gui didn't seem to be lying, and he really had the urge to do so. Their conversation made Shui Yuanpei's face turn black. You won't be smart even if you go bald. Also, if the dean hears you say that he has little hair, you will be punished with a ruler again. The ruler was a type of board made of two pieces of wood stuck together. It was 8 feet and 2 fen long, and when hit by the hand, it would produce a loud sound without much strength. It was a warning sound. Of course, it would be quite painful if you hit it hard. Chao Gui rolled his eyes and said to Ma Huolong, do you want to make a bet? I'm guessing that the dean has 864 strands of hair. You want me to count the dean's hair? Ma Huolong squinted at him. You're too vicious. I'm just joking. Chao Gui laughed and didn't take it seriously. It was just a joke. Then, his gaze fell on a lady in white who got off the train. She was about 17 or 18 years old, wearing a long white dress with pink flower petals as embellishments. Her long hair was simply tied behind her head. She was beautiful, and her skin was fair. She gave off the vibe of the most beautiful white flower on the highest peak of the Yun nation. Her stubbornness and purity were mixed together, as well as her heroic spirit and intellectuality, forming a very unique charm. The woman merely swept a cold glance at the crowd before she continued walking forward. What's wrong? The girl you couldn't forget yesterday. Ma Huolong noticed his gaze and teased, your eyes are about to pop out. I feel like I've been shot in the chest. Chao Gui clutched his chest with an infatuated look in his eyes, unwilling to leave the figure of the other party for even a moment. Let me give you a piece of advice. These clothes aren't something an ordinary aboriginal can wear. I'm sure there's someone in their family with a high status. Moreover, her strength is stronger than yours. Looking at her age, her talent must be amazing. No matter what you think, you have no chance. Ma Huolong comforted him sincerely. Zhao Prince Consort doesn't even have a spirit wheel, yet he married the noble Empress. Chao Gui waited until the figure of the other party disappeared into one of the carriages before he turned his head and said seriously to Ma Huolong, let's make a bet. I'll bet my entire life on it. You're crazy. Ma Huolong's expression changed slightly when he heard what the other party said. He felt that the other party was simply crazy. We are good friends, right? Chao Gui felt that his heart was burning so hot that it was about to burn him. What are you going to do? Ma Huolong asked warily. In a while, find an opportunity to flirt with her. Then, I'll be the hero and save the damsel in distress. Although this move is cliché, it's tried and true. Chao Gue looked straight into the other party's eyes and tried to convey his determination to him through his gaze. You are crazy, but I'm not. Ma Huolong was shocked. He was going to flirt with her. Not to mention anything else, the other party's strength was enough to crush him to death with one hand. Don't worry, I'll appear at the right time. Chao Gue immediately vowed. He naturally knew that Ma Huolong wasn't a match for the other party, but he didn't necessarily have to be the hero and save the damsel in distress. He just had to appear at the right time and leave a deep enough impression on the other party. It wasn't impossible for the hero to save the hooligan. Tong Lan, what are those people doing? Yu Wui, who was inspecting the condition of the train, wiped the black coal off his face and asked. I don't know, Tong Lan replied casually. How's the condition of the equipment? There was a problem with the pressure relief previously, and the third valve of the equipment was slightly damaged. If everything goes well, we should be able to return, Yu Wui replied. If anything goes wrong, you'll be hung up for target practice. Although Yague seems to be kinder these 2 years, you and I both know that's just a facade. If he makes a fool of himself in front of Her Majesty, you can imagine the consequences. He'll be sentenced to at least 10 minutes of target practice. Tong Lan used a calm tone to describe the terrifying content, which made Yu Wui shudder. Don't say such scary things, okay? Yu Wui had a bitter look on his face, but it was obvious that he was inspecting more carefully. Excuse me, let me take a look at the third valve. Tong Lan kicked him and went forward to check the condition of the pressure relief valve. There's no problem with the distribution valve. A young girl withdrew her head and said. Just like Yu Wui, her face was covered in dust. After a while, Tong Lan inspected the condition of the locomotive and returned to the carriage where everyone was. As soon as she entered the carriage, she heard laughter. Did you see that? Those guys' eyeballs are glued to Tong Lan. Should I say that they are blind or that their courage is commendable? Both. Du Laolu rubbed his chin and pondered. Little girl, you've grown up. It's a pity that she's too fierce. No one in Lan City dares to propose marriage. Sure gone. The previous voice continued. 2 veins popped out on Tong Lan's forehead. She flashed and stepped on Su Peng's head. Gaw. Su Peng was about to continue speaking, but he was stomped back into his stomach. Following which, she kicked Du Laolio's face. Tong Lan then flashed back to her seat. Both of you don't have a good memory after so many years. Not far away, Shurgan was trying his best to pull his neck up while the other was trying to stop his nosebleed. Are you done with the inspection? Tong Lan turned her head and glanced at him with a cold gaze. There's no problem with the hooks between the bogie and the carriage. Shurgan spread his hands and said, as long as there's no problem with the power unit, it's fine. There's a small problem, but it's not a big problem. Yu Wui and Wu Ye were on duty for the first 4 hours, followed by Peng Shi and Peng Jia. Tong Lan took a form from the table and flipped through it as she spoke. After a while, she put down the form and looked out of the window. Who are those people? Some scholars from the academies in the Yun Nation. It seems like they are going to board this Empress and return to Lan City with us. A young man supported his chin with one hand and flipped through a calculus book on the table with the other. Their appearance here must be in order from Her Majesty or Yague. Given Her Majesty's character, she wouldn't do such a thing. It should be Yague. Shurgan also glanced at the scholars outside, who were clicking their tongues in wonder at the train. It seems like Yague is very interested in them. Another scholar laughed. There are too few aboriginals, Tong Lan replied without even lifting her head. Yague said that he wants to implement universal education, but it won't be possible to achieve results in a short period of time. The number of teachers is also a problem. I reckon that Yague has taken a liking to them. They should be competent enough to be teachers. Actually, I really want to be a teacher. I have even prepared target shooting equipment. I even specially got someone to get me a box of repeating crossbows from the Yun Nation, but Yague didn't give me this opportunity. Another student spread his hands. Another 3.5 years. A pretty lady with a graceful figure clenched her fist and said, "We will graduate in another 3.5 years." Sigh. Everyone in the carriage sighed. 3 years and another 3 years. Have you guys finished your calculus homework? Let me copy it. Du Lao Lu, who had just stopped bleeding, suddenly had a change in expression. Half of the people in the carriage had a similar change in expression. Not only did they have a huge change in expression, but they also had a deep hatred for Du Lao Lu for bringing up the matter that no one wanted to think about. Sure gone, just let me have a look at your homework. I definitely won't be like that fool who even copied his name. Su Ping said. It's in the residence. Sure gone spread his hands. You guys work harder. Get on the train. Follow the order of the academies. Don't run around after getting on the train. There is a bathroom in every carriage, and meals will be provided in the middle, someone in front of the group of scholars shouted. The preparations are very thorough. We can finally set off. I'm really curious about how this big guy will bring us to Lon City. Zhouwu Academy, Yandao Academy, Shaojiang Academy, come over here. Huaya Academy, Shuangwen Academy, Jiangling Academy, go that way. Many scholars boarded the train in order with curiosity and anticipation. The Empress stood on the second floor of the train station and watched everything. Do you think these people are useful? The Empress asked. Let's give it a try. Maybe we can find some useful talents. After all, they have studied for more than 10 years, and it would be a pity to just leave them there, Renbachyan answered while turning his head to look at Hua. He saw Hua running around with Zi Donglai's saber in his hand. From time to time, he would pull out his saber and split a row of wooden blocks. He even made sounds of ha, ha. Needless to say, Hua was pretty good at drawing his saber and slashing. Not far away, Zi Donglai stared at Hua expressionlessly. Although it couldn't be seen on his face, Renbachyan could feel his heart aching from his gaze. Inspector Hua, although you and the Protector General are from the same family, I still hope that you can fulfill your duties. Renbachyan turned around and said to Hua Qinghua, who had a tattoo on her face and exuded a wild aura from head to toe. She didn't seem to mind Zi Donglai standing beside her. Of course. I've been watching him 24/7. Hua Qinghua patted her magnificent chest and guaranteed. Zi Donglai's expressionless face finally couldn't help but twitch a little. Baidu search Yunlai Pavilion, novel website and let you experience the fastest novel updates. All the novels are updated in seconds. Chapter 1035. The carriage was very spacious. After all, it was designed according to the size of the Aboriginals. There were only 4 seats in each row, and the gap between the 2 opposite seats was also very large. All the seats in the carriage were made of pure leather. This was mainly because Dayo produced a large number of 4-corned cattle and sheepskins every day. They were extremely cheap, and the merchants preferred those precious furs. Upon seeing this, Renbachyan simply bought leather and used it on all his products. This included the sofa, the seats, the cab of the tractor and the truck, and even the surface of the table clock. He would nail a layer of cowhide to it. It had to be said that using animal skin was much more environmentally friendly than using paint. As for cheap substitutes like leather, there was no need for them at all. Of course, leather, which was extremely cheap in Dayo, was still a little extravagant for the people of the Yun Nation. However, in the eyes of the students, this was a train, and it was natural to use all kinds of luxurious decorations. Therefore, they didn't find it strange at all and just felt that it should be like this. As the train roared, everyone in the carriage felt the carriage shake. At the same time, they could see the scenery on both sides beginning to move. It's moving. For most of the students, this feeling was very novel. Although everyone had the experience of sitting in a carriage, it was their first time sitting in the stomach of such a huge steel monster. They looked out of the window as if it was their first time going out. It seems to be getting faster and faster. It's really fast, much faster than a carriage. It's also much steadier than a carriage and more comfortable than those trucks. How many soldiers do you think this thing can carry? Look at these seats. One carriage can carry 80 people. I counted before coming up just now. Including the shorter ones, there are a total of 19 carriages. It should be able to transport 1,500 people. If we remove the seats, we can probably double the number of people. How does this thing move? Judging from the previous shaking, it seems like it's being pulled by something. It should be that black monster head. It's faster than a horse. It's hard to imagine that it can move faster than a horse while dragging such a big thing. Look at both sides. It's made of iron. This thing is much heavier than I thought. Plus, it's carrying so many people. After all, they were students from many universities. If it were an ordinary person, they would probably sigh and not have any other thoughts. After a short period of curiosity, they quickly studied the function and power of this train. However, the things they were curious about were things that they had never come into contact with or even considered before. Naturally, they couldn't study anything. Renbachian asked someone to bring Shirgan and Tonglan over. Greetings, Your Majesty, Your Highness. Give these to them and let them write down their answers. Renbachian handed a stack of white paper to them. The two of them glanced at it. There was a very simple question on it. Those scholars from the Yun nation. Shirgan said with certainty. Renbachian nodded. Isn't it too simple? Tonglan had a doubtful look on her face. In the eyes of the Aboriginals, scholars from the Yun nation and Great Xia had always been synonymous with knowledge. The poems that were occasionally passed on, as well as the ancient books hidden in the houses of many ministers, all came from them. On the one hand, the Aboriginals were confident in their martial prowess and felt that they could fight against 18 Aboriginals alone. On the other hand, he felt that the other party was very knowledgeable. Even the students of the academy couldn't avoid this kind of perception. Tonglan had previously looked down on them because she knew that Yague's teachings couldn't be learned anywhere else. But in his heart, he also acknowledged their attainments in knowledge. That was why she said, at the very least, they are competent in the field of Enlightenment education. Otherwise, with her pride, she would have sent them back to the furnace to be remade. That's not necessarily the case. Renbachian smiled. Got it. The two of them nodded and left with 2 stacks of white paper with a question on it. The students from the Yun nation were still discussing the steel monster that they were riding when they saw 2 people coming from the other side of the passage. One of them was a burly man with a big beard, and the other was the goddess-like woman in white that they had just seen. Both of you. Someone stood up and wanted to ask. This was because they weren't allowed to pass through the carriages to go to the previous one. There must be a reason why the other party was here. Where's your dean? Shirgan asked with a gentle smile. I am. May I know what business you have with me? An old man stood up and asked. Zhao Prince Consort hopes that you can answer this question. Shirgan left 80 pieces of white paper in his hand. Everyone just needs to write down the answer in your heart and leave your name. Following Shirgan's words, the old man's gaze suddenly changed. Was this a test? Did they want to see the strength of the various academies? The old man took the paper and looked at it. There was only one line on it. Are you still or moving? What's the reason? After the two of them left under everyone's gaze, the old man got someone to distribute the paper to everyone. Although many people were still thinking about the woman in white, they knew what was more important at this moment and looked at the paper in their hands one after another. Still. We obviously didn't move. I was wondering what it would be, but it turned out to be such a simple question. It can't be that simple. There must be some mystery in it. I also don't think it's that simple. It should be movement. We have been moving along with the train. This question is interesting. I think it's correct to say that it's still or moving. It seems that any answer is correct. Any answer is correct, which means that any answer is wrong. Some people began to think about whether there was any relevant discussion in the ancient books that they had learned. Unfortunately, no matter how he rummaged through his mind, he couldn't find anything related to it. Chao Gui looked at Tong Lan's back view as she left. He really wanted to push Ma Hualong off the train when Tong Lan passed by. He could then use his rude behavior as an excuse to apologize and continue the conversation. Unfortunately, Ma Hualong seemed to have guessed what he was thinking. Ma Hualong stepped aside and stared at him. Sitting with you is a mistake, Ma Hualong complained in a low voice. You are crazy. You are a woman. Have you never seen a woman before? It's different this time. It's completely different. Chao Gui shook his head and stood up to receive a paper. After reading it, he pondered for a moment and looked out of the window for a moment. Then, he took out a pen and an inkstone from his bag and went to the washroom to get an inkstone. He wrote, "It's both moving and still. Moving is compared to the outside of this steel beast, while being still is compared to the steel beast. Our movement and stillness are not solely determined by ourselves, but are related to the environment we are in." Ma Hualong, who was beside him, was also writing at a rapid pace. When both parties put down their pens, they looked at each other and smiled. Let's make a bet. Our answers are the same, Chao Gui said. No, you are crazy now. Wangjing College. Moving or still? What's the use of asking such a question? What's the use of such a question for governing the country and the people? Zhou Rui looked at the paper in his hand and snorted. What do you think the meaning of asking such a question is? Based on Zhao Prince Consort's actions, I'm afraid he's trying to find someone who fits his criteria. From his actions, it can be seen that he has been using conciliatory methods in order to bring the people of the Yun nation under the rule of the Aboriginals. In order to govern people, there must be someone who can govern them. I'm afraid the Aboriginals don't have anyone they can use. Let's not talk about the traitors first. It can be seen from the fact that the selected city commanders are all from the Yun nation. I'm afraid what he wants to do now is to find someone who fits his criteria, just as I guessed. How should I answer this question? It wasn't until noon that someone came to take the paper away and leave another paper behind. What made Chao Gui regret was that the person who came wasn't the woman in white. I must ask her name next time, Chao Gui thought to himself. Chao Gui thought to himself as he took the second test paper from the side. He only took a glance at it and was immediately stunned. Bachelor tax. Unmarried 25-year-olds will have to pay 1 tax a year, unmarried 30-year-olds will have to pay 2 taxes, unmarried 35-year-olds will have to pay 3 taxes, and so on. Every tax is 10% of the annual salary. What do you think about this bachelor tax? How will it be implemented? What kind of impact will it have? The entire carriage was in an uproar after seeing the questions on the paper. Even the deans of the various academies were at a loss. Baidu searched the novel website of Yunlai Pavilion to let you experience the latest and fastest novel chapters. All the novels are updated in seconds. Chapter 1036. I can't understand it, I can't accept it, it's simply ridiculous. The carriage that Jitai Academy was in emitted waves of complaints. In the Yun Nation, women couldn't become officials and could get married at the age of 16. Most of the women in the academy were over 20 years old. They could be said to be the typical unmarried young women with high academic qualifications. Usually, it was not rare to see his family busy arranging marriages for him. He did not expect to see someone urging him to get married again, and it was the imperial court urging him to get married. The female students of Jitai Academy were going crazy. I'm going crazy. I've never heard of a bachelor tax. A woman grabbed the hair on her head, and the veins on her forehead bulged. Not only them, but the male and female students of the other academies also reacted the same way. It was just that the male's reaction was slightly slower. Although it was just a test paper, it had already explained a lot of problems. Ridiculous. This is ridiculous. It's not just ridiculous, it's ridiculous. Bachelor tax. I've never heard of such a thing. A few scholars from Wangjing Academy looked at the examination papers in their hands and loudly refuted with an incredulous tone. His voice wasn't soft, but no one found it strange. Even students from other academies thought this single tax was unheard of, let alone Wangjing Academy, which was known for being old-fashioned. Previously, when I saw the Aboriginals adopting a conciliatory policy in the Yun Nation, I thought that Zhao Prince Consort was someone with a deep heart. I didn't expect him to propose such an absurd idea. Wangjing Academy's Zhou Rui was livid. I think it's a good thing. Chang Lu, who had eyes like a reptile, gave off a cold feeling when she looked at someone. After thinking for a long time, she raised her head with a playful expression. Such a reason to increase taxes is simply absurd to the extreme. What good thing is this? A scholar snorted lightly. Zhou Rui calmed down after hearing this. After thinking for a while, he whispered, Brother Chang is right. The more absurd the imperial court of Dao is, the better it is. If that's the case, it'll be easy. We just have to follow Zhao Prince Consort's wishes. Bachelor tax. Du Laolu smacked his lips and looked expectant. I really want to pay the tax. I'll tell that person of yours when we get back. Su Ping said contemptuously. He can beat 8 of you with one hand. Ahem, I'm looking forward to you guys paying taxes. Du Laolu immediately changed his tune. Remember that you still have some private money. Do you want money or your life? Su Ping smiled maliciously and poked him with his elbow. When someone saw Tong Lan sitting there with a pensive look on her face, he laughed and said, Why? Are you thinking about paying taxes? You still have years to go. Some of us here have to pay taxes. Humph. Tong Lan snorted. She didn't really care about 10% of her annual salary. And she's only 17 this year. She was thinking about what Yague was thinking and what kind of impact the bachelor tax would have. In fact, those who find it difficult to get married are the weakest, and those with the lowest incomes. If this single tax is really introduced, the pressure on them to survive will be even greater. Shurgon twirled a pen in his hand as he spoke. That is indeed the case. This plan is inappropriate. Our aboriginals are better off, but it's the commoners at the bottom of the Yun Nation. It's not easy for them to survive. If we increase their tax burden, I'm afraid there will be repercussions. The one who spoke was Shuryu. Although he had the same surname as Shurgon, he was a commoner. He was also the only commoner student left in this batch. Rebound. Just kill them. In any case, they are all incompetent people. Tong Lan said coldly. Do you really think so? Shurgon smiled and looked at her. Tong Lan had changed a lot over the years. Even though she often punched and kicked Du Laolu, Su Ping, and the other students, she had never bullied any of the commoners in the school. This lass, Tonglan, always said one thing but thought another. They are just some useless people from the Yun nation, Tonglan replied without looking up. Shurgan smiled and didn't say anything. I don't know why, but Yague always seems to be very anxious and seems to be planning something. Therefore, he values the people from the Jing tribe and the Yun nation a lot and wants to use them to solve the problem of manpower shortage. This time, it's obvious that Yague is going to pick some people from the Yun nation, so he won't start a massacre in the Yun nation, Shiryu analyzed. As for why Yague was so anxious, she wasn't sure. However, there were some students who were clear about this. For example, Shurgan and Tonglan. They all knew why he was so anxious. However, most of them didn't know. Even though these students were the descendants of court officials, most of them were collateral relatives, so they naturally wouldn't know about such an important matter. Renbochin carefully looked through the examination papers and picked out more than a dozen of them. Did you find anything? The Empress was combing Hua's long ponytail. Even though this looked like something a biological mother would do, it was just a whim. Or rather, she was a little bored in the car. The number of times the Empress had combed Hua's hair over the past 3 years could be counted with one hand. Hua enjoyed it very much as she lay on the Empress's knees, raised and lowered her legs behind her, and drew circles on her clothes with her fingers. Renbochin took out more than a dozen examination papers and handed them to the Empress. These people look good. I don't want to read them. I don't understand them. The Empress waved her hand. Renbochin smiled and took the examination papers back. Even though these examination papers didn't explain the relationship between stillness, movement, and reference objects concisely, the meaning was there. If they were given more time, they might be able to summarize it in more incisive terms. He had to admit that the standard of these scholars was pretty good. The people in this world weren't lacking in wisdom. They just lacked shoulders that were tall enough and a different way of thinking. At night, Renbochin asked someone to distribute the third set of examination questions. Not long after, someone sent the answers to the second set of questions to him. After flipping through a few pages, Renbochin laughed. Those female students from Jitai Academy have a lot of resentment. All the female students used various angles to explain how inhumane and tyrannical the bachelor tax was. The resentment of highly educated, older, and unmarried young women hit him in the face. Renbochin had a faint smile on his face as he looked through the examination papers one by one. Until he saw a few examination papers, he frowned slightly. These examination papers weren't criticizing the bachelor tax, but praising it. They even said things like, a groundbreaking measure not seen in 1,000 years. He looked at the top of the examination papers and saw that they were students from Wangjing Academy. It was the same for a few consecutive examination papers. Renbochin frowned and pondered for a moment. He flipped through the first examination paper and saw that the answers of the students from Wangjing Academy didn't have any eye-catching insights. 2 of the examination papers were even empty. As for the other 5, 2 of them were vague comments. It was impressive to be able to make vague comments on such an issue. The standard of the other 3 examination papers was very ordinary. Coupled with the exaggerated comments on the bachelor tax in the second examination paper, Renbochin immediately gave Wangjing Academy an X in his heart. After that, Renbochin finished reading all the answers, picked out more than 10 examination papers, and put them aside. He then sighed and said, they don't live up to their name. Nothing to your liking. The Empress, who was playing fishing with Lu Hua out of boredom, looked up at him and then lowered her head again. Don't tell me you are following the requirements of the students from Black Bamboo Academy. Renbochin immediately knew that the Empress had misunderstood and explained, I'm talking about the top of the 5 big academies, Wangjing Academy. At this point, Renbochin shook his head slightly and said, these scholars from Wangjing Academy have improper intentions. The scholars sent by the Academy are cunning and malicious toward the imperial court. This is inseparable from the culture and education of the Academy. Even if their methods are more brilliant, I would still look up to them. They probably think that I'm a fool. Close down this Wangjing Academy. Close it down then. The Empress didn't seem to care at all. If you want to, you can just flatten it to avoid leaving behind any disasters. There's no need. Have you heard of this saying? A scholar's rebellion failed after 3 years. These people can only use small tricks. If they don't repent in the future, then we can execute their 3 families. This will be considered justifiable. The Empress, who was reaching out to clap, paused, looked up at him, and said, "Previously, my father said that those who are knowledgeable are vicious. After seeing you, I believe it. It was just a casual remark. I have already spared their lives from the hands of Her Majesty. If they still act recklessly, then I can only say Amitabha." With a few simple sentences, the 2 of them sentenced Wangjing Academy to death. This Chao Gui from Shaojiang Academy is not bad. He actually proposed a method of reducing taxes instead of increasing taxes. He has some insight. Renbaqian then looked at the dozens of examination papers again and found Chao Gui's paper from the first set. The answers on both papers were quite to his liking. In addition, Ma Hualong from Shaojiang Academy, Quan Quaning from Jiangling Academy, Wu Chenxing from Baiquan Academy, and the brothers Wu Fan and Wu Qin from Fenghu Academy were also not bad. There were also some people who weren't as outstanding as these people, but they had a certain level of insight and were worth looking forward to. Next, he waited to see the answers on the 3rd set. It seemed like he would be able to gain something this time. In addition to the scholars from the Yun Nation, some of the students from the Academy had also written the 2nd set. The growth of these students made him extremely pleased. Baidu search 081 Chinese network yen. No advertising words. Chapter 1037. Ning Chongqing sat on the seat of the train. Some of the students had already fallen asleep, but he couldn't fall asleep no matter what. His somewhat turbid eyes shone with wisdom and radiance. He already knew that Zhao Prince Consort had gathered so many academies this time to select suitable talents. In addition, he was afraid that he would have some other ideas. For example, he wanted to see the current thoughts of the Yun Nation scholars and their perception of the imperial court. However, after reading these papers, he felt that he was probably wrong. Although the scholars had always been the target of every dynasty's court, Zhao Prince Consort was different. He didn't care about the thoughts of the scholars. Judging from his previous actions, he had always been resolutely doing what he wanted to do. Although the papers were for the students to answer, they also revealed their thoughts. Let's not talk about the first paper. The second paper was about the bachelor tax, which should be for the aboriginals, right? The aboriginals didn't have a large population, but with their talents, if their population was the same as the Yun nations, there would be no place for other races in this world. As for the third paper, it was the one that touched Ning Chongqing the most. There were 2 questions on it. One was the integration of ethnic groups, and the other was using trains or tractors as examples to illustrate the relationship between productivity and the economy. There was also an explanation on productivity and the economy. Productivity was divided into natural productivity, and the production of various tools, such as trucks and tractors, belonged to social productivity. The increase of social productivity promoted economic development, and conversely, economic development also required the increase of social productivity. The 2 complemented each other. He had never seen or heard of these remarks before, and he used a few simple words to point out the problems that were closely related to the development of society and the people. The term society was used very well, and it directly included people from all walks of life. Ning Chongqing spent the whole night figuring out the relationship and couldn't speak for a long time. Amazing. Zhao Prince Consort's knowledge was really amazing. After reading this question, he recalled the Dayo Imperial Court's decrees and the new things that Zhao Prince Consort had come up with over the past few years. Many of the problems that had troubled him suddenly became clear. He and the others looked at things from different levels, but Zhao Prince Consort had always looked at the root. That was why he promoted the popularization of tractors at a very low price from the beginning and recruited laborers to build roads a few years after the Yun nation was destroyed. Yi Futian had thought that he was more or less proud of himself, but now it seemed that this was not the case. From what he knew about the current situation of the Chuyun Chamber of Commerce, this was not the case. The goods transported by the merchant associations were no longer the same as before, where they only pursued the most expensive and profitable goods. Instead, they added a large number of goods that were related to the livelihood of the common people. Even if the profit was small, this must be Zhao Prince Consort's order. Thanks to this, the prices of many items in the Yun nation had dropped significantly compared to the previous dynasty, and the lives of the people were actually better. Amazing! Ning Chongqing's brows loosened and tightened as he muttered. Headmaster, what did you say? A teacher from the academy beside him asked. I said it's amazing. Ning Chongqing said again and didn't explain further. From these examination papers, Ning Chongqing realized that Renbaqian's focus was different from most people's. It could be said that he was completely above everyone else. The current imperial court of Dayo was influenced by him, and it was very different from the previous dynasties. If this continued, he didn't know what would happen to Dayo under his influence. Ah! We are finally here. My whole body is stiff from sitting for a day and a half. Chao Gue got off the train and stretched. A day and a half is too fast. I heard that it used to take half a month to travel this way. Ma Hualong said as he looked at the noon sky. That's true. Chao Gue agreed. Before the advent of tractors, it was unimaginable to reach Lan City from Pingdu in a day and a half. However, in just a few years, everyone had personally experienced such changes. The feeling was especially obvious when they got off the train. At this time, only the students were at the train station in Lan City. After all of them got off the train, they were brought to Lan City. As for the emperor's entourage, it had already left before they got off the train. Even those young people with unknown identities were gone. Do you think those people are from the Black Bamboo Academy? Ma Hualong suddenly asked. I think so too. I don't know what's waiting for us next. I'm also very curious. I thought that there would be an exchange in Lan City to select talented people. I didn't expect to be tested on the train. I don't know what's waiting for us next, Chao Gue said with a smile. Shui Yuanpei, who had a cold expression on his face, walked to the two of them and seemed to want to say something. If you have something to say, just say it. Don't beat around the bush. Ma Hualong wasn't polite at all. What do you think of these questions? Shui Yuanpei asked. The other two naturally knew that he wasn't asking how they should answer the question. Instead, he was asking for their opinions on the person who set the question. I think Zhao Prince Consort is different from what we thought, Chao Gue said directly. I think so too. Ma Hualong smiled and said, His Highness is famous all over the world for his incomparable heavenly works and miscellaneous skills. Some of the new things in the past few years were created by his hands. Moreover, I heard that he has a good understanding of agriculture. I originally thought that was it. However, the last two questions this time showed that Zhao Prince Consort viewed the nation and its people from a very high level. From the ethnic integration question, it can be seen that he doesn't view the aboriginals as first class and the rest as second class. I'm looking forward to meeting him in person. Ma Hualong's tone was a little gloomy. In this world where looks are everything, I think he should be able to understand me. Although Zhao Prince Consort isn't handsome, he isn't ugly either. Chao Gui laughed and patted Ma Huolong's shoulder. Didn't you see him from afar the other day? Although he looks a little fierce, he's definitely not ugly. Shui Yuanpei couldn't help but laugh. Ma Huolong was extremely ugly and had been looked down upon before. It was said that he was once recommended to Wangjing Academy by Cui Qin, a famous expert from the Yun Nation, but he didn't even get to enter. Although Ma Huolong often teased himself about this, everyone knew that this was a thorn in his heart. I wonder how they will communicate. The scholars of Wangjing Academy whispered to each other as they approached the city wall. Just deal with it as it comes, another person said. The people of Wangjing Academy didn't know that they had been passed by him on the train. Chang Lu walked behind them and listened to their conversation. She sneered in her heart, fools, a bunch of fools. It's the same from top to bottom. They don't know the time and don't know the number of days. Every day, they hold on to the things left behind from thousands of years ago as the supreme truth and don't dare to go beyond the rules. You originally had the support of the imperial court, but now that the world has changed, you still hold on to those ridiculous ideas. What a bunch of fools. I believe that Xiao Prince Consort understands the situation of Wangjing Academy. Next, we just need to find an opportunity to meet that person. It's about time for someone else to take charge of Wangjing Academy. Those scholars didn't expect that Chang Lu, who had always been quite active, would actually have such an idea. Many scholars entered Lon City, and they were most curious about the street lamps that had been rumored to be there. Every 30 meters, there was a street lamp that stood on the side of the road. It was about 20 meters tall and had a glass lamp on it. Every night, these street lamps would turn Lon City into a city that never sleeps. The rumor of a city that never sleeps had long spread throughout the Yun Nation. In addition, the aboriginals were really tall, strong and fierce-looking men could be seen everywhere on the streets of Lon City. This made many scholars feel somewhat uneasy while walking among them. Fortunately, they could occasionally see some merchants from the Yun Nation. Chao Gui found an opportunity to approach a shopkeeper who walked out of a shop and looked at the crowd with a smile. Shopkeeper, nice to meet you. Chao Gui cupped his fists. Which academy are you from? Why are there so many scholars? The shopkeeper smiled. He had come out of the shop out of curiosity after seeing these people. I'm Chao Gui from Shaojiang Academy. The students from the 5 major academies, Salt Path, Huaya, Shuangwen, Drunken Scripture Hall, Leitang, and Jitai Academy are all here. We are here to interact with Black Bamboo Academy. Oh, you are students from Shaojiang Academy. The shopkeeper became more friendly after hearing this. Is it safe to walk around Lon City now? Chao Gui asked with a smile. It's considered safe. Nowadays, disputes need to be resolved at the arena, and there are fewer fights than before. Furthermore, if someone were to pick a fight, not only would they be whipped, but they would also be punished to clean the public toilets. Therefore, it's fine even if you walk around alone. However, you still have to be careful not to have conflicts with others. Those simple-minded fellows won't be able to control themselves if they get angry. Although they will be severely punished afterward, we will also suffer a great loss, won't we? Therefore, don't act impulsively no matter what happens. I'm afraid that you are young and impetuous. Also, ignore those who pick a fight and look for the people from the Public Order Division. They are available on every street. Do you see that person? That uniform belongs to the Public Order Division. The shopkeeper enthusiastically explained to Chao Gui. Thank you, shopkeeper. Chao Gui cupped his fists in gratitude. You are representing the people of the Yun Nation. Don't embarrass yourselves at Black Bamboo Academy. The shopkeeper didn't forget to remind him and whispered in his ear, of course, if they are really anxious, there's no harm in taking a step back. Thank you. After thanking him again, Chao Gui hurriedly caught up with the group and told them what he had heard from the shopkeeper. The others heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing this. After all, they were under a lot of pressure in a city that was filled with human-shaped weapons. Everyone was arranged to stay near the Ministry of Rights. There was an area there that was reserved for envoys and attendants from other countries, and it was a good place for them to stay. At the same time, someone informed them that there would be an exchange the next day. However, no one knew how the exchange was going to be conducted. First, set a small goal, such as 1 second. Chapter 1038. A scholar pushed open Chao Gui's door and shouted, "Someone just came to inform us that we will be visiting Black Bamboo Academy on the first day, free activities on the second day, and lectures on the third day." Apart from Chao Gui, there were a few other scholars in the room. Lectures? Someone stood up and asked doubtfully. Every academy will send one student to present their expertise. The lecture cannot be less than an hour and not more than 2 hours. Is there any specific content? No. Anything is fine as long as it's something they are good at. That's interesting. I reckon that no matter who goes on stage, they will have to face criticism from the other academies. If they are not careful, they will lose face. That's why they have to present their expertise. That's interesting. Everyone's expressions were not solemn, but they were not relaxed either. Although there was only one person on the stage, he represented the reputation of the academy. If he gave a good lecture, the entire academy would gain face. If someone were to make things difficult for him, he would lose a lot of face. Sure enough, there's no such thing as a good banquet. Someone tapped the book with a fan. It's the same. Every academy will face various situations, and it will depend on their own means. If the content of the lecture is problematic, it will definitely be criticized by others. Therefore, the content of the lecture is very important. Not many people cared about the tour. It was more or less the same for every academy. At most, there would be some differences in scale and scenery, and some academies would have some unique characteristics. However, Black Bamboo Academy, wouldn't its unique characteristic be fighting? Everyone's thoughts were on the lecture. As for the candidate, it was obvious that it would be one of the most outstanding students in each academy. Brother Chao. What are you thinking about? You seem to be distracted. Someone patted Chao Gui's shoulder. From the beginning, he had not been paying attention to the content of the conversation. Thinking of the beauty. Someone laughed. Chao Gui nodded seriously. We should be able to ask for the name of that girl tomorrow, right? Everyone burst into laughter. Everyone knew which one he was talking about. The beauty of the girl in white was indeed captivating. The next morning, everyone from Shaojiang Academy, Salt Academy, Jiangling Academy, Drunken Scripture Hall Academy, and Jitai Academy met up and headed to Black Bamboo Academy. There were more than 20 academies with more than 400 people. The time was staggered, and the fourth batch set off 2 hours later than the first batch. It's actually next to the palace. After circling around and arriving at the front of the academy, some students could not help but click their tongues when they saw the palace not far away and the huge courtyard in front of them. The two of them were too close, separated only by a martial arts arena. This was unimaginable in the Yun nation. The Empress doesn't have to worry about assassination. After all, the Empress was one of the top experts in the world. According to the latest ranking of experts, the Empress was ranked 3rd in the world. Naturally, she wouldn't be as sensitive as the other emperors. Furthermore, the name of number 1 in the world was no longer blank. It was Li Fu, an ordinary name that sounded like that of a mountain villager. Li Yuanzhu was still in 2nd place. Many people were looking forward to seeing Li Yuanzhu fight with Qi Zixiao. Although Li Yuanzhu had always been ahead of the Empress on the list back then, when the Empress was still the 7th most powerful expert in the world, she had already killed the 5th most powerful expert in the world, Hua Sanlu. Later on, she killed the 4th most powerful expert in the world, Ting Yu. In recent years, other than the 2nd most powerful expert in the world whose situation was unknown, almost all the others were killed by the Empress. No one dared to say that Li Yuanzhu would win if the two of them fought. Your Highness. Ren Baqian, who was wearing a maroon suit, was already waiting in front of the academy. After seeing everyone, he opened his arms and said, "Welcome to Lan City." "Greetings, Your Highness." Regardless of what they thought, everyone respectfully saluted. In terms of etiquette, the people of the Yun nation were much better than the aboriginals. Chao Gui saw a few men and women standing behind Ren Baqian, including the woman in white. "You are all from the most famous academies in the Yun nation and the most outstanding young people in Dayo. This exchange is an opportunity for you and the students of the Black Bamboo Academy to broaden their horizons and increase their knowledge. Later, I will let the students of the academy take you on a tour to see how different it is from your academy. If you have any questions, you can ask them. You can enter all the areas, including the laboratory." A question came from behind Ren Baqian. "Including the laboratory." Ren Baqian nodded and responded with a smile. In any case, they couldn't understand it. Compared to the laboratory, they were probably more interested in the library. Of course, some of the little things in the laboratory were also very interesting. The scholars in front were a little puzzled. What was the laboratory? It sounded like it was quite important. "All right, you can go ahead and have a tour. We will meet again later." Ren Baqian waved his hand at the crowd. He still had other things to do after making arrangements for the students. "Your Highness." An old man with white hair and a healthy rosy face stepped forward and asked, "I don't know if there are any rules in Black Bamboo Academy. I'm afraid that some people will unknowingly offend the academy." The person who spoke was the dean of Jiangling Academy. "You can't spit anywhere. Other than that, there's nothing else. In addition, don't disturb the students who are in class." Ren Baqian waved his hand and smiled. Black Bamboo Academy was strict and lax. In terms of academics, he would frequently hang students up for target practice. Even though they wouldn't die, it was inevitable that they would suffer some injuries. This made Ren Baqian no different from a devil in human skin in the student center. Other than academics, Ren Baqian didn't have any requirements for the students. Whether they read comics after class or fell in love. What bothered him was why the number of students falling in love at such a young age was so low. So far, other than Du Laolu, who got married in his 2nd year of high school, none of the other students had fallen in love at such a young age. He didn't even have a chance to show off his democracy, freedom, benevolence, and harmony. After Ren Baqian left, the students behind him came forward. Shurgan stood in front, cupped his fists, and said gently, "I'm Shurgan, and I've been ordered by Her Highness to bring you around the academy. You don't have to be reserved. If you have any doubts, you can ask me directly." Although Shurgan had a fierce face, a big beard, and a shaved head like the other aboriginals, he didn't look as ferocious as the others and seemed to be easy to talk to. "These are my classmates, Tong Lan, Shiyu, Cho Feng, and Tai Tianxua." Shurgan briefly introduced the rest of them. The 5 of them were enough for 5 different academies. After that, Shurgan made arrangements for them. Chao Gui was overjoyed to find out that the lady named Tong Lan, who was dressed in white, was the one accompanying Shaojiang Academy. "Thank you." Ning Chongqing smiled warmly at Tong Lan. "Okay. It's good that you know. So, don't run around." Tong Lan looked indifferent and didn't give them any face, which made many students a little angry. They were invited by Zhao Prince Consort to come to Black Bamboo Academy for an exchange. The person who was talking to him was the dean of Shaojiang Academy, one of the 5 great academies. How could he have such an attitude? Ning Chongqing didn't mind at all. He laughed and said, "Of course not." He turned to look at the crowd and said, "You are all outstanding students of the academy. I brought you here to broaden your horizons and absorb the strengths of others. Observe more in a while and ask questions if you don't understand. Don't get distracted." "Dean, do you mean that since the other party's attitude isn't good, we should ask them everything we see and cause them some trouble?" Many students immediately pondered and felt that they understood the meaning of the dean's words. "Let's go." Tong Lan crossed her hands behind her back and led the way. "This row is for offices. Yagui's office is over there, so I won't take you there." The first row was an ordinary brick building, and Tong Lan simply walked past it. "I'll take you to see the students who are in class. Your Highness and Lin Mengxing are the only teachers in your academy." Chao Gui squeezed to the front of the line and asked. Chao Gui felt his heart burning even more when he smelled the fragrance left behind by Tong Lan. "Yes." Tong Lan nodded slightly. "How many students are there in Black Bamboo Academy?" "There are currently 7 academic departments and 24 classes. Each class has about 50 students, so there are more than 1,000 students in total," Tong Lan replied without turning her head. 24 classes, right? How do they teach?" Chao Gui asked a question that many people wanted to ask. 2 teachers, 24 classes, and 1,200 students. "You will know in a while." Tong Lan couldn't be bothered to answer this question. After walking past the first row of brick buildings, they saw classrooms from the second row onwards. There were 6 classrooms in each row, so there were a total of 6 rows around the small lake. The 3 rows on the west side of the lake were the junior high school classrooms, chemistry laboratories, infirmary, and a standalone library. The 3 rows on the east side of the lake were the high school classrooms, physics and chemistry laboratories, as well as the utility room. The university classrooms were a distance away. When they were near the first classroom, everyone heard a voice coming from it. An integral equation with 2 unknowns and the degree of the unknown term is 1 is called a quadratic binary equation. All quadratic binary equations can be transformed into. Upon hearing this voice, everyone became curious. They didn't know what was being taught as they had never heard of it before. Furthermore, since there were only 2 teachers in the academy, who was the one speaking inside? Tong Lan led everyone to the window. When everyone saw the situation in the classroom through the window, they immediately gasped. They saw a person with 2 heads and 6 hands standing in front of the stage. One of his heads was looking at the white screen in front of him, and his eyes emitted a strange glow that formed lines of words on the screen. The other head was facing the dozens of youths below. His 6 arms were holding a wooden stick, an iron ruler, a steel knife, a whip, and a slingshot. This strange scene caused everyone to be petrified in an instant. All of them widened their eyes and had no other reaction other than gasping. Set a small goal first, such as 1 second. Remember, bookseller's residence. Chapter 1039. The morning sun was scorching hot. However, everyone from the Shaojiang Academy felt a chill from head to toe. What is that? Chao Guilian couldn't maintain the smile on her face. Her eyes widened, and her fingertips trembled. Didn't you ask how the 2 teachers teach? Tong Lan was inexplicably happy when she saw everyone's reaction, and her tone became a little more provocative. Her back was facing everyone, but her eyes were slightly curved. This isn't human. A student swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and like a chain reaction, everyone present swallowed a mouthful of saliva in unison. This was nonsense. Even a blind person could tell that it wasn't human. Of course not. Tong Lan's mood was even better. She couldn't suppress the smile on her face any longer. It's a Wangliang that Yagui caught. It looks a little strange, but it's quite knowledgeable. Tong Lan rolled her eyes and blurted out. Wangliang. Everyone looked at the fellow with two heads, one looking in front of the other, and felt that this thing was different from the legendary Wangliang. However, everyone still believed it. Even such an inhuman thing had appeared. What else could they not believe? Everyone stood outside the window, blocking a large portion of the light. Not to mention the uniform sound of inhaling and swallowing of saliva. The students in the classroom turned their heads to look outside. Just as they turned their heads, the monster standing in front of them lashed out with the whip in his hand. Paw! There was an explosive sound in the air. A blood-red mark immediately appeared on that student's forehead. If it was an ordinary person, this whip would have split open their flesh. That student quickly looked straight ahead and secretly used one hand to dig out some ointment from the table and apply it on his forehead. Everyone, who had just caught their breath, almost couldn't catch their breath again when they saw this scene. Everyone finally knew why the students inside were so well behaved. If they were in the Shaojiang Academy and there was a row of people standing outside, the students definitely wouldn't be in the mood to listen to the lecture. With a knife on their neck, they couldn't be disobedient even if they wanted to. Everyone suddenly felt that the days of being punished in the academy were simply like being in a fairyland. In the future, if anyone said that it wasn't easy to study hard for 10 years, they should come to the Black Bamboo Academy to take a look. After a long time, Ning Chongqing let out a long breath. Is this how you teach? This is the lightest punishment. If you are lucky, you can still see the target practice, Tong Lan said. Then, she left everyone who was still in a daze and headed to the next classroom. Everyone hurriedly followed, but there were waves of tempestuous waves in their hearts. The only teachers in Black Bamboo Academy were Zhao Prince Consort and Lin Mengxing. The others were all legendary demons and ghosts. There was actually such a thing in the world, and it was even captured. These were still acceptable. After all, there had always been legends of ghosts and gods. But what was Yagui? Could it be that there was an extremely powerful demon in the Black Bamboo Academy? Tong Lan sounded so familiar. In just a few minutes, everyone had received too much information, and they couldn't digest it for a while. And that terrifying teaching method. Everyone just wanted to find a place to calm down. Unfortunately, Tong Lan didn't give them a chance to digest this as she continued walking forward. When they arrived at the second classroom, everyone subconsciously looked to the front and saw an exquisite and beautiful lady. Everyone let out a long sigh of relief. Inexplicably, they felt a little more relaxed. However, halfway through this sigh of relief, the lady's eyeball suddenly shot out from her eye sockets. The eyeball, together with its flesh and blood, sprayed onto a student's head and exploded. Red, white, and black liquid splashed all over the student's head and face. Then, the lady took out an eyeball from nowhere and stuffed it back into her eye socket. She continued teaching as if nothing had happened. This scene caused everyone from Shaojiang Academy to have ashen expressions, and their entire bodies trembled without end. Is this also a demon? Ma Huolong asked while trembling. This is a demon. Tong Lan suddenly felt that it wasn't such a chore to bring these people on a tour. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to see such a funny expression. Needless to say, Yagui was getting more and more mischievous. Originally, there were some robots that were similar to humans, but after being broken twice, the current robots began to develop in the direction of a demon. Almost all of them had some functions that weren't very lethal, but were very frightening. For example, the mathematics teacher with two faces. He was staring at you almost all the time, and there were no blind spots. Coupled with the weapon in his hand, it was still quite stressful for the students. There was also this ghost-eyed lady. Her eyeballs didn't hurt when they hit the body, but they would directly explode and be covered in paint. They would have to scrub off a layer of skin if they wanted to wash it clean. Otherwise, they would have to go to school with a head full of red and green. Next up was the third classroom. This time, there wasn't even a human figure inside. It was a semicircular body with a lot of steel tentacles and an electric shock function. These are collectively known as demons and monsters. They are some strange creatures that exist in unknown places. No one knows how long they have lived. Even though they aren't humans, their knowledge isn't low. Tong Lan simply categorized these messy things into a general category. The people from the Shaojiang Academy had no choice but to suppress the fear in their hearts as well as the doubt of, why does this thing exist in an unknown place and yet possess human knowledge? They followed Tong Lan and continued to walk forward. Sure enough, they also saw some non-human creatures. Along the way, everyone only paid attention to these things. They almost didn't pay attention to other things, such as the composition of the students and what they were taught. Along the way, they saw the female students from Jitai Academy with ashen faces. Both parties looked at each other and saw that their faces were about the same. They knew that the other party must have seen those horrifying non-human creatures as well. This is the chemistry laboratory of the middle school department. When they arrived at one of the classrooms in the third row, everyone saw dozens of students standing in front of tables. There were iron cylinders, glassware, and other things on the tables. A sphere with tentacles was hanging from the ceiling, emitting an electronically synthesized voice. Now, put a small piece of potassium into the water and see what kind of reaction it will produce. Laboratory. The laboratory that Zhao Prince Consort mentioned previously. Everyone had just become a little immune to those strange-looking teachers. The main reason was that there were too many fresh things, which diluted the impact of those demons and monsters. Just as everyone was looking curiously, they heard a student in a corner shout, "Oh no!" More than half of the students instantly hugged their heads and squatted down. Boom! A ball of purple flames exploded in that corner, and a bucket of water was blown away and splashed onto many students. Idiot, you put such a big piece of potassium. This power is at least half the size of a palm. Tong Lan snorted gloatingly. She was too familiar with this. They had done this many times in the past. One of her dresses was also burnt. There was no need to inform the people from the clinic. When they heard the noise, they came out from the infirmary. They went in to take a look and praised, "Not bad, no one is seriously injured. Practice makes perfect." This saying is true everywhere. Everyone from Shaojiang Academy felt a toothache when they heard this. They were so familiar with hugging their heads and squatting down. Was it because of practice makes perfect? That's right. Just do it a few more times and it will be fine. Tong Lan saw through everyone's thoughts and smiled. Chapter 1040. When they arrived at the library, everyone was finally able to calm down. The things they saw just now had a huge impact on them. No one expected the Black Bamboo Academy to have so many inhuman beings. And those students, they were so proficient that it made their hearts ache. Is this how you study? Chao Gue didn't forget to strike up a conversation with Tong Lan even in this situation. He lamented in his heart that it wasn't easy for these aboriginal students. The girl in front of him looked like she was only 18 years old. She was currently a first-year undergraduate student, which meant that she had started studying at the age of 11. Tong Lan glanced at him, which was a rare occurrence. Chao Gue felt his heart tremble when he saw Tong Lan's clear gaze. What kind of awareness do you think we have when we study? Tong Lan said in a flat tone and lowered her head. She couldn't hold it in anymore. If she wasn't in front of these people, she would have laughed hysterically. Chao Gue was in deep veneration for her. At the same time, he felt sorry for her when he saw her lowering her head. It was hard to imagine what kind of hardships an 11-year-old girl would experience in this academy. You are using your life to study. Pfft. Tong Lan almost couldn't hold it in. Of course, it wasn't wrong to use one's life to study. It was just that Du Laolu, Su Peng, and a few others couldn't finish their homework or pass their exams. However, Tong Lan quickly snorted and made a dismissive expression. Take a break. You can take a walk around the library. I have something to do and have to leave. Tong Lan opened the door and smelled roasted sweet potatoes. Don't forget about this. Tong Lan didn't need to look to know who it was. There was only one person in the academy who loved roasted sweet potatoes and dared to light a fire in the library. Don't worry, it's fine. Li Fu was sitting cross-legged on the ground and didn't think much of the person who came. When he saw so many people, he specially came to the library. He didn't expect them to come as well. This is... Chao Gue and the others were curious. This person wasn't an aboriginal. Doorman, Tong Lan said faintly. Feel free to look around. Don't damage it or take it away. I have something to do and have to leave. She left everyone behind and returned to the classroom in a flash. She smirked as she hammered the table. The expressions of those people just now were too interesting. After she left, many of the students of the academy bowed to Li Fu. Although he was a guard, he was an outsider. Being able to be a guard here meant that he was no ordinary person. If those students didn't even understand this, then they wouldn't be here. Many students were strolling around the library. Only Ning Chongqing sat beside Li Fu and sighed. My old bones can't move anymore. Li Fu glanced at him and sighed. Young people nowadays. Ning Chongqing's heart skipped a beat. He turned to look at him and found that he was still fiddling with the sweet potatoes. He didn't know if he was talking about him or the students. How should I address you, sir? Ning Chongqing probed. Don't be so genteel. It sounds awkward. Li Fu. Li Fu took out the sweet potato from the charcoal fire, and with a flick of his finger, a layer of black skin fell off. Then, he stretched out his hand and slapped the air, extinguishing the pile of charcoal on the ground. Li Fu's habitual action caused Ning Chongqing's gaze to freeze. These two actions looked simple, but in fact, they were anything but. The sweet potato was soft. With a flick of his finger, the skin fell off, but the inside was unharmed. This kind of power control was not something an ordinary martial artist could achieve. And to extinguish the charcoal fire with a palm, the wind from the palm would only make the charcoal fire burn even more fiercely. Thinking of the name Li Fu, Ning Chongqing's heart trembled. Could this be the one on the ranking? Why was he here? Dean, I don't know what language this book is written in. Someone ran over with a book for Ning Chongqing to see. Ning Chongqing suppressed his bewilderment and took the book. The language was very different from today's. Although there were some similarities, there were very few differences. Another language. Where did it come from? Ning Chongqing was extremely puzzled. Nowadays, there are no such languages in several countries. Zhao Prince Consort came from several countries. Thinking of this, Ning Chongqing got up and bowed to Li Fu. He hurried to the many bookshelves. Indeed, all the books were written in this language. If there were only one or two books, it was possible that Zhao Prince Consort had obtained them from somewhere else. However, all of them were written in this language, which explained some problems. There was another country outside of these countries. Zhao Prince Consort appeared in Dayo instead of one of the other three countries. Could that country be outside of the mountains in the west or south? While Ning Chongqing was deep in thought, the others found some good things. For example, comics. Although they couldn't understand them, they found the drawings rather interesting. "Sir, may I ask what's upstairs?" Someone who couldn't understand all the books on the first floor came to Li Fu and asked with a bow. "Why don't you go up and see for yourself?" Li Fu replied casually. He wasn't a librarian and didn't care what these people were doing here. In any case, they were brought here by that little girl. After a while, an exclamation came from the second floor. "There are actually so many martial arts manuals." "What?" someone shouted from the first floor. "The second floor is full of martial arts manuals." Upon hearing this, more than half of the students on the first floor disappeared and ran to the second floor. Although most of these students didn't have much strength, they were still quite curious about martial arts. It was a kind of curiosity that scholars had about the martial arts world. Following which, a burst of exclamations came from the second floor. There were hundreds of bookshelves on the second floor, and at least half of them were all kinds of martial arts manuals, sword techniques, all kinds of weapon moves, lightness techniques, and some secret scrolls with unique effects. Chao Gue and the other students simply couldn't take their eyes off them. "We can read all the martial arts manuals here at will," someone was speechless. "If I study here, maybe I can become an expert," someone couldn't help but say. Very soon, someone poured cold water on him and said, "You have to survive first." Thinking about what they saw just now, everyone suddenly shuddered. Chao Gue ignored the words of the others and looked for a cultivation method that he was interested in to carefully study it. Even if he couldn't memorize everything and couldn't practice, it would be good to learn by analogy. One had to know that the martial arts manuals here were 10 times more than those in the big sections. If he missed this opportunity, he was afraid that he wouldn't have such a good opportunity again. After staying inside for 15 minutes, they heard a commotion downstairs and saw that people from other academies had arrived. Tong Lan also appeared at the right time and said, "Go outside and rest for a while. I will show you the laboratory and other places later." Chao Gue had no choice but to put the book back in its original place reluctantly. It was rare that he didn't pay attention to Tong Lan. Instead, he focused all his attention on recalling the secret scroll that he had just read. The other students didn't have any objections. After all, they had suffered too much today and suffered too many fright. Indeed, they should rest for a while. Baidu search 881 Chinese network yen. No advertising words. Chapter 1041. Everyone was resting by the lake, but they couldn't calm down. Soon, the topic shifted back to those teachers. Black Bamboo Academy's teaching methods were terrifying, and so were the books in the library. Everyone could understand this. However, the existence of those teachers gave them a fright. This was what they were most concerned about after they came back to their senses. Those inhuman beings. Tong Lan felt very comfortable as she listened to everyone's conversation. It was so fun to tease these people. She didn't have this opportunity in the past. Ning Chongqing walked to Tong Lan's side and sat down with a smile. Today was really an eye-opener for us. Tong Lan was a little hesitant on how to answer. Ning Chongqing didn't wait for her to answer and asked with a smile, "Is the old teacher in the library the one on the list?" "You know about it." Tong Lan thought for a while and said, "Thanks to him, nothing in the academy has ever been lost. With him around, who could steal?" Ning Chongqing confirmed his guess and smiled bitterly. It was indeed him. Such a person was actually a gatekeeper at Black Bamboo Academy. She let out a long sigh and asked again, "What did you learn?" "Chinese, mathematics, chemistry, and physics." Tong Lan counted with her fingers and realized that there were only 4 subjects. There were many more subjects in the library, such as sociology, psychology, architecture, poetry, medicine, education, materials, agriculture, philosophy, law, manufacturing, economics. There were too many. At this thought, Tong Lan felt that the academic curriculum wasn't important anymore. To learn everything, even those perverts with swords on their backs couldn't do it. Ning Changqing was a little interested and asked, "What are these subjects? Can you explain in detail?" "I'm very interested." Tong Lan raised her eyebrows impatiently. However, seeing that these people had brought her so much fun, she suppressed her eyebrows and said calmly, "Chinese is literacy, and mathematics is algebra. You also have to learn the arithmetical classic, right? It's similar to the arithmetical classic. As for physics, it's the various phenomena of nature, the structure of matter, the interaction of matter, and the law of motion of matter." Ning Changqing interrupted Tong Lan and asked, "The matter you mentioned, everything in the world can be touched or not. As long as it exists, it's all there. Whether it's soil, stones, trees, flowers, birds, beasts, the air we breathe, the clouds and lightning in the sky, or the ice and snow on the peaks, it's all there." When Ning Changqing heard the other party's words, his eyes were filled with shock. The surrounding students who were attracted by the conversation couldn't help but say, "Isn't this the great Tao of heaven and earth?" That's what Yagüe said back then. Tong Lan thought about it carefully. That's not wrong. In the eyes of others, it was the great Tao of heaven and earth. However, in the eyes of the students of the Black Bamboo Academy, it was subdivided into different things. Absolute silence. Learn the great Tao of heaven and earth. It's not as powerful as you think. Tong Lan was thin-skinned, so she explained, for example, why do fruits fall from the tree? Don't fall into the sky. It fell vertically. Because the earth is below. Someone asked subconsciously. Then why did it fall down? Tong Lan asked. Everyone, not many people had thought of such a logical question. Why? This is what we are learning, Tong Lan said faintly. She had no intention of explaining to everyone. The problem seemed simple to her, but the people of the academy began to scratch their ears and cheeks. Why was that? In the past, no one had asked about it, so they didn't feel it. Now that someone had mentioned it, they felt like a feather was scratching their hearts. Young friend, I'm also very curious. I hope you can enlighten me. Ning Changqing couldn't help but say. Tong Lan then explained, the earth has gravity. Every object in the world has gravity, and this is one of the few fundamental forces in the world. When everyone heard the words, one of the few fundamental forces in the world, they immediately felt that it was amazing. Even the people who were chatting stopped talking and gathered behind Tong Lan to listen to her. Since every object in the world has gravity, why is it not sucked up to the tree but to the ground? Shui Yuanpei asked with a cold face. Although he didn't fully understand, he immediately found a flaw in Tong Lan's words. The strength of gravity is related to mass. The earth has the greatest mass, so it will fall to the earth. Tong Lan thought about it but didn't say that the world was a sphere. After all, this was only mentioned in the book. It only said that the earth had the greatest mass, so it produced the greatest gravity. Seeing that everyone still didn't understand, Tong Lan asked, why does the world revolve around the sun? Everyone from the academy was immediately puzzled. Doesn't the sun rise in the east and set in the west? Tong Lan was instantly speechless. She suddenly realized that there were many things that couldn't be explained to these people. If she wanted to explain, even 3 days and 3 nights wouldn't be enough. In the end, she gave up with a headache and said, if you have studied physics, you will know. It is too troublesome for me to explain this to you. Someone suddenly said, you're not trying to scare us, are you? Otherwise, why can't you explain it? There was a moment of silence. Tong Lan's face instantly turned ice cold. She flashed into the air, looked for the person who spoke just now, and wanted to step on him. I explained it to you with good intentions, but you actually doubt me. Miss Tong, please calm down. I didn't mean it. Chao Gui managed to keep up with Tong Lan's speed. He cupped his fists in front of Tong Lan and smiled bitterly. Actually, I can't explain it myself. The scholar who spoke just now said in a low voice. He sounded very unconvinced. Tong Lan's face immediately turned ashen. You guys are too ignorant. It's a waste of time to explain to you guys. Tong Lan was furious as she spoke in a disdainful tone. At this moment, many of the Shaojiang Academy's students also revealed angry expressions. The Shaojiang Academy was one of the 5 academies in the Yun Nation, and they were the best of the best. How could they not be treated with respect? With just one sentence, you've condemned everyone as ignorant, yet you can't give a reason for it. How can anyone be convinced? How could he not be angry? Why don't you tell us? Are we ignorant, or are you lying? You don't have much knowledge, but you do have a big temper. Upon hearing everyone's words, Tong Lan felt as though she was about to erupt with anger. Since young, who had ever doubted him like this? What's more, he was only telling them out of kindness. Otherwise, he wouldn't even bother with them. Who would have thought that he would be questioned as nonsense by them? Tong Lan's delicate little face turned ashen. She was so angry that her hair was fluttering in the wind. All of you, shut up. Ning Chongqing bellowed. Then, he cupped his fists at Tong Lan and said, Young friend, I'm already so old, and I'm only half a step away from entering the coffin. However, these students are all young and impetuous. If they have offended you, please don't take it to heart. Then, his tone changed. However, if you don't explain, I'm afraid that these disciples will not be convinced and think that you're lying. Not only will it affect you, but it will also affect Xiao Prince Consort's reputation. Tong Lan's chest heaved a few times, and she glared at everyone fiercely. She was extremely angry, but she had to suppress her anger. At the same time, she knew that if she didn't explain to everyone, there would really be gossip about the Black Bamboo Academy. However, it wasn't easy to explain. Just the fact that the world was round was enough to argue with them for a long time. After thinking for a while, she said in a gloomy tone, Have you seen a ship go out to sea and return? If you haven't seen it before, then it's useless for me to explain it to you. I've seen it before, someone immediately said. Half of the 20 people in the Yun Nation had seen it before. What's the last thing a ship sees when it goes out to sea? What's the first thing a ship sees when it returns? The mast. Many students thought for a while and replied immediately. That's right. Tong Lan raised her head and looked at everyone with a condescending expression. Why are the red and yellow moons sometimes round and sometimes curved? Have you noticed it? Does this have anything to do with what you said just now? Although everyone didn't know the reason, they immediately objected. Of course, Tong Lan replied arrogantly. You all know about the dim moon, right? The dim moon was a scene where 2 parts of the moon overlapped and intersected. It usually happened once every 10 years or so. During the dim moon, the 2 moons overlapped, and the moon was also missing a corner. Due to the time period, the process was very clear. When compared to the usual moon, it was very obvious. When Ning Chongqing heard Tong Lan mention the dim moon, he suddenly remembered an interesting story he had heard before. He raised his head and stared at Tong Lan. Do you mean that the world is round? Baidu search 881 Chinese network yen. No advertising words. Chapter 1042. Do you mean that the world is round? Tong Lan looked at him in surprise. She didn't expect him to react so quickly. The world was round, which contradicted most people's understanding. How is that possible? How can the world be round? Many people subconsciously refuted. Even though the person in front of them was their dean, saying that the world was round was too sensational. That's right, the world is a ball. Tong Lan shrugged her shoulders. Then, she looked at the other students contemptuously and said, "He is much smarter than all of you." His words made everyone choke to death. They wanted to scold him, but he was the dean of the academy. However, they couldn't agree with the conclusion that the world was round. Not to mention that it was a ball. If it's a ball, why didn't we fall when we were standing on it? Someone questioned immediately. This ball has gravity. As mentioned just now, gravity is everywhere as one of the fundamental forces of this world. However, the greater the mass of an object, the greater the gravity. One of the fundamental forces of the world. What do you mean? Gravity, electromagnetic force, weak interaction force, strong interaction force. Of course, you won't understand even if I explain. Tong Lan snorted softly. She hated doing useless things. She didn't like the people of the Yun Nation either. However, she also didn't like being questioned. Everyone thought that it would be thunder and lightning or time, but they couldn't understand the words that Tong Lan said at all. They only knew about gravity after Tong Lan explained it to them just now. "Dean, why did you say that the world is round?" Ma Hualong asked Ning Chongqing respectfully. He really respected Ning Chongqing. He was rejected by the Wangjing Academy back then and was filled with grief and indignation. If Ning Chongqing hadn't accepted him into the Shaojiang Academy, he didn't know what would have happened to him. He only knew that he was indebted to the dean. Ning Chongqing stroked his beard and said, "Someone had such a guess, or rather, many people had such a guess." He had always been non-committal about this guess and treated it as a joke. When he heard Tong Lan mention the mast and the dim moon, he immediately thought of it. There are still smart people, but unfortunately, they aren't you. Tong Lan really didn't have a good expression on her face. She was as cold as ice and her words were always sarcastic, which made everyone extremely angry. When a ship goes out to sea, the last thing to disappear is the mast. When a ship returns, the first thing to appear is the mast. This proves one thing. The surface of the sea looks flat, but it is actually curved. It was the same for the red and yellow moons. When the dim moon appeared, the red moon blocked a part of the yellow moon. But what was the difference between the yellow moon and the one he usually saw? Not at all. This is because after the sun sets, it will be on the other side of this world. The world will block a portion of the sunlight, so there will be a crescent moon. That's impossible. The dim moon is because the yellow moon's radiance was blocked by the red moon. Someone immediately refuted. Tong Lan seemed to be amused by these words. The ice and snow melted away, leaving a wide smile on her face. Yellow moon radiance. You probably don't even know what the moon is, do you? And how do you explain the curve of the sea? Although the crowd found it hard to answer, someone immediately shouted, "In the end, it's all just a guess. You don't have any concrete evidence, so you just treat it as a theory." No matter what, I don't believe that the world is round. Tong Lan frowned slightly. This bunch of stubborn fellows. How can the students of the Shaojiang Academy be so unreasonable? You don't have enough evidence. Just the curve of the sea can't explain everything. Chao Gui couldn't help but take a step forward. No matter what, he couldn't accept the other party belittling the academy. However, after he finished speaking, he turned to look at the crowd and said, "Let Miss Tong finish speaking. Where have all the years of studying gone?" Tong Lan rubbed her brows and said, "Like I said before, you don't know what the moon is. Do you think the moon can emit light? In fact, the moon is just a huge stone ball. Can a stone emit light? In the dark, if a stone is placed on the ground, can you see it? You can only see it when there is light. As for the specific reason, It involves the principle of light. However, if you think about it, you will understand. If the moon can't emit light, then the sun is on the other side of the world. Part of the light is blocked by the world, while the other part shines on the red and yellow moons. That's why you see the crescent moon. It's precisely because the world is round that you can see the crescent moon. Even so, maybe the world is like a plate and can't be considered round. Therefore, there is also the curve of the sea and the curve of the Earth's surface. Adding these 2 points can prove some things. Tong Lan explained frantically. Meanwhile, Shi Yu and the rest of the people from the Jitai Academy had also arrived. What are you guys discussing? Shi Yu asked curiously. Telling them that the world is a ball. Tong Lan looked depressed. If she had known earlier, she wouldn't have said so much. In the end, so many things were involved. The world is round. These words caused many girls from the Jitai Academy to exclaim in surprise. Shi Yu saw Tong Lan's embarrassed look and found it a little funny. Ignoring the people from the Jitai Academy, he said to Tong Lan, "Can't you just let them see the curve of the earth with their own eyes? In the sky, they can see the curve of the earth." The 2 academy students were immediately attracted by this sentence. You mean they can go to the sky? How do they go up? What does the sky look like? Let me help you ask. Borrow old Lee's hot air balloon, and he can take you to the sky. Shi Yu smiled at everyone. That's his lifeblood. Tong Lan snorted. He's not that stingy. Also, don't forget that we are researching airplanes. That kind of hot air balloon has already been eliminated. Shi Yu patted Tong Lan's arm and said. At the side, the people from the Shaojiang Academy were still telling the people from the Jitai Academy about the world is a ball matter. After all, there were many girls from the Jitai Academy, and they all had an intellectual aura about them. This inevitably made the students from the other academies a little enthusiastic. Shi Yu turned his head to take a look, stood beside Tong Lan, and said, I heard that there will be a lecture in the next few days. All the academies will send people to give lectures. Yague didn't say anything to us, but we can talk about the world being round. I'm afraid those people will explode again. Tong Lan snorted. She already found it troublesome to deal with a few dozen people, let alone a few hundred. Do you think they won't tell the students from the other academies when they return? Shi Yu laughed. Although he wasn't as exquisite as Tong Lan, he was still superior. There were no ugly girls in the aboriginals. When the people on the other side were almost done and finally quietened down, Tong Lan said expressionlessly, Go back and ask if you can take a look at the sky. There's no point talking about this topic now. Today's tour isn't over yet. Let's go. Other than the academies, there were various laboratories and workshops. These laboratories were different from the chemistry laboratories that were used to teach students about chemical reactions. The laboratories at the back were all places where new technology was being developed. Although the most advanced technology was in the laboratory on Mount Termination, where there were hundreds of scholars and dozens of sword masters that Rinpoche had kidnapped from Earth, the things that the laboratories in the academy were researching weren't simple either. For example, airplanes. The progress of airplanes in Mount Termination, including the engine and other technical reserves, as well as the overall design of airplanes, had roughly reached the level of World War II. However, the students in the academy were also researching their own airplanes. Of course, the engine blueprints were provided by the laboratory on Mount Termination. Even so, the things that these students accomplished were enough to put most people to shame. Baidu search 081 Chinese network yen. Yen. Chapter 1043. The current Black Bamboo Academy was no longer as shabby as it used to be. Over the past 7 or 8 years, it had expanded almost every year, and its area had expanded by more than 10 times. The artificial lake in the backyard had long become the front yard. The black bamboo forest, which gave the academy its name, had now become a part of the academy's scenery. After passing the artificial lake, there was a piece of flat land, followed by many classrooms, and then the black bamboo forest. After passing through the artificial lake, there were workshops for blacksmiths, carpenters, pottery, and a small glass workshop. Although there were only 4 workshops, the area was very large, much larger than the previous classrooms and the artificial lake. The students of other academies had never built workshops in the academy. After all, these industries had nothing to do with the academy. However, this was the specialty of the Black Bamboo Academy. The students were responsible for designing, thinking, and even assembling, while the craftsmen were responsible for turning some of their ideas into reality. Nowadays, there weren't many students here, but the workshops weren't idle either. Clanging sounds were non-stop, sparks were flying in the blacksmith workshop, and sawdust was flying in the carpenter workshop. We have an idea for these workshops. After designing the blueprints and measurements, we will hand them over to them to make the actual products. Sometimes, they can't understand, so we have to help them make the products on the spot. Tong Lan pointed at the workshops on both sides as she walked quickly. Although she didn't want to pay attention to the students, they didn't let her off and kept asking questions along the way. Ning Chongqing, in particular, was extremely interested in the courses in the academy even though he didn't comment on it. He discovered a problem. The things in the Black Bamboo Academy were completely different from the other academies. The students of the other academies only had to study, but the students of the Black Bamboo Academy had to do many other things besides studying. You will know in a while. Tong Lan was too lazy to explain further. She brought everyone to the experimental area. Everyone looked up and saw a row of brick buildings that were similar to the classrooms in front of them. On both sides, there were several huge storehouses. They didn't look special from the outside. This is the laboratory, Tong Lan said as they walked. Everyone immediately knew that this was the main point. What are they doing here? Experimenting and designing some new things. Tong Lan led everyone past the laboratories and saw that they were full of cabinets and tables, and there were many papers scattered on them. Can I take a look? Ning Chongqing asked. You can only look and not touch. Don't mess up the things inside, Tong Lan said expressionlessly. Ning Chongqing nodded, walked in, and went straight to the stack of papers scattered on the table. He saw that they were all blueprints of unknown objects, and they were all labeled with detailed sizes. However, he did see a few relatively complete designs, or rather, imaginative designs. There was a complete picture on it. The objects in the picture had the body of a flying insect or a bird, and there were words that he could not understand next to them. Lifting his head and looking around, he saw huge shelves filled with dossiers. On the table by the window, there were a few wooden models, which were the items on the scrolls. What is this? Tong Lan crossed her arms and leaned against the door. She looked at everyone walking around and replied expressionlessly, a plane with a passenger. It can carry people. Fly into the sky. Ning Chongqing was extremely interested. No matter which world you are in, flying freely in the sky is one of the dreams of mankind. Of course. Where is it? Have you made it? I'm very surprised. The things in your academy have really broadened my horizons. The old man smiled and praised them. If it was someone else who said that they could fly into the sky, he might not believe it. However, in this academy led by Zhao Prince Consort, it might become a reality. After all, they could make calls from thousands of miles away. There was even a telephone in the Shaojiang Academy, which was installed by a graduate of the academy. It's in the warehouse, Tong Lan said casually. It's not difficult to fly into the sky. The others were speechless. What a big tone. Furthermore, why was the Black Bamboo Academy doing things that seemed like a fantasy to others? What was the world like a ball? What was a plane that could carry people into the sky? For this world, the Black Bamboo Academy was way ahead of its time. Therefore, when people learned about the ancient race academy, they did not feel respect. Instead, they felt suspicious and strange. One step ahead was a great man with great foresight, while 2 steps ahead was a lunatic who raved. The Black Bamboo Academy, which was at the forefront of this world, was obviously that lunatic. When they passed by the 3rd classroom, Tonglan saw a box with a wire attached to it. She rolled her eyes, and her face finally showed some expression. The corners of her mouth curled up as if she had thought of something fun. "Do you want me to take a photo for you?" Photo. Everyone was puzzled. Tonglan took out a stack of hard and smooth paper from a table and showed it to everyone. "This is it." Everyone saw that there were pictures on the paper. There were trees, houses, purple bamboo forests, and a small lake. Almost all the scenes that they had seen in the academy appeared on the paper. Moreover, unlike paintings, the images on the paper seemed to contain scenes from reality. Other than the color being black and white, it was almost the same as reality. "What is this?" Everyone was surprised. Photo paper, or rather, photo paper, can record everything in reality. It won't change even after 10 or 100 years. Tonglan tried her best to look serious, but her expression was slightly strange. Anyone who was familiar with her would immediately know that she was up to no good. Although she was always very arrogant, Tonglan was also an 18-year-old girl. She was lively and quick-witted, but only people who were familiar with her would see this side of her. "What are these?" "Thank you." Ning Chongqing stroked his beard and smiled. He really wanted to see what he would look like in the so-called photo. "Okay, stand properly. I'll get ready." Tonglan took out the box. She pointed the camera at everyone and connected it to the wires. She looked up at everyone who had stood properly according to her instructions and pressed the shutter. Click. After taking 3 photos in a row, Tonglan nodded in satisfaction. Done. She then took out a photo from behind her. On it was a picture of a student from the academy with 6 arms. He looked very lifelike. This will be the effect after the image is taken. Everyone exclaimed, "It's just like the real thing." Of course it's real. His soul has been captured in here. As long as this photo is torn, he will die. Tonglan finally revealed her fangs. She had an undisguised smile on her face as if she had finally succeeded. It was exactly the same as the negative characters in the comics. She had learned it from them. In an instant, everyone was stunned. They felt as if a basin of ice water had been poured over their heads. Your thoughts. Many of the Academy's scholars were stunned for a moment before their expressions changed drastically. That's right. Why do you think this thing is the same as the real thing? Because it's the real thing. After this soul-capturing camera takes a photo, your soul will be captured in it. Tonglan felt very carefree when she saw everyone's expression turn into one of horror. In the future, if Yagüe asks you to go west, you can't go east. If he asks you to catch a dog, you can't catch a chicken. Otherwise, as long as the photo is torn, your soul will fly away and scatter. Who is Yagüe? Zhao Prince Consort. He is an evil spirit in human skin. Otherwise, why do you think we always talk about Yagüe? This time, everyone was even more frightened. Demonis. Why did you do such a thing? Many people's faces turned green. Tonglan felt that she should find a place to laugh again. She laughed heartily in her heart. Idiots. However, there were a few people who didn't have much of a change in their expressions. Ning Chongqing even laughed. This young lady was rather interesting. He didn't believe that the soul would be captured on the photo. Humans had souls. Did those trees and stones have souls as well? Furthermore, if that was the case, why did she say it now? Did she trick them here just to take a photo? Why go through so much trouble? Tong Lan's thoughts turned extremely fast. Do you think that trees and stones don't have souls? Everything in the world has souls. As Tong Lan spoke, the photo was an image of a wall. Tong Lan tore the photo a little and revealed a strange smile to everyone. As long as I tear the photo, everyone stared intently at her hands. Many of them broke out in cold sweat. Boom! Suddenly, a loud sound erupted nearby. Gravel flew everywhere. Although it wasn't far away, it was separated by a courtyard. Tong Lan was also startled by this loud sound. Her hands trembled and she tore the photo. She immediately identified that it was most likely an explosion in the university's laboratory. However, she almost couldn't hold back her laughter. She was too cooperative. Everyone looked at the torn photo in her hands and then at the thick smoke not far away. Their faces turned completely green. Even the faces of Chao Gui and the others changed. First, set a small goal. For example, 1 second. Chapter 1044. Ning Chongqing looked at Tong Lan's carefree smile and couldn't help but laugh. Little friend, don't scare them. If there really was such a treasure, how could it be here? How could these photos be placed so casually? As long as the students were given some time, they would be able to understand. However, the shock of seeing such a realistic photo, coupled with the series of things they had seen before, made everyone subconsciously believe the other party's words. Although everyone was doubtful that this world was a ball, they were still very surprised by the things they saw. There were also those completely different words in the library. This made the Black Bamboo Academy somewhat unfathomable in the eyes of others. While Tong Lan was tearing the paper, some idiot happened to detonate the laboratory and gave everyone a huge shock. It could only be said that it was too coincidental. Tong Lan didn't want to go overboard. She was just venting her anger at being questioned by everyone. Now that she was done scaring them, she stopped smiling and snorted when the other party pointed it out. I was just teasing you guys. I said you guys are stupid, but you still don't want to admit it. You're going too far. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief at first, but then they were infuriated by her words. Let's go and take a look at the things in the warehouse. I have completed my mission. Tong Lan put her hands behind her back again and felt a little bored. What was that just now? The old man asked with a smile. A camera, a small object that records images through optical imaging. Yague casually mentioned that they had made it out of boredom. It was too bulky and not easy to use. I heard that it could be made into a small one, but Yague said that there's no market for it now, and we don't have that much time to make it, so we left it there for now. That's right, this camera was made by a few students when they had nothing to do. After all, there were theories about optical imaging in physics books. Some students had taken the time to study it and had come up with a few. As for the market, although there was one, it was not big. The most important thing was that they didn't have enough manpower right now. Now, the students didn't even have time to rest just by studying and researching. Moreover, the camera involved many aspects. Just the reduction of the volume and the color film alone would take the students a long time. How could they waste their manpower on such a product? At present, Renbachian's main focus was still on technological products that could bring about great changes in society. The most important thing now was not the camera, nor was it the airplane. In fact, it was another technology that was closely related to the camera. Sound movies. Through the combination of a sound film and a phonograph, Renbachian could do something big. Universal education. That's right, Rinpoche's idea was to use video screens and phonographs to popularize education. As long as the instructional movie was recorded in advance, a group of people would be sent to play it in each city every night. Although it couldn't nurture any talents, it could allow some adults to learn how to read. Being literate meant being able to read newspapers and magazines, and there were other possibilities. This method of fishing with a net was also the most cost-effective method at present. The world is changing very quickly now. In 10 or 20 years, the world will be completely different from what it was thousands of years ago. If they could not keep up with this change, they would be eliminated and reduced to the bottom of society. However, ordinary Aboriginals, the Jing tribe, and the people of the Yun Nation didn't have the conditions to learn. They had to hunt, work, and survive. We also don't have the spare energy to let ordinary people put down their livelihood to learn things that can't fill their stomachs and can only focus on the future. However, the imperial court should still give them a chance. As for whether they could grasp it or not, it was up to them. I think there will always be some people who can grasp it, and we have changed the fate of some people. Rinpoche once said this to the Empress. Rinpoche had already asked the laboratory at Mount Zhongsha to carry out this matter. After all, the people there knew what he wanted. The requirements for the equipment weren't high, and the laboratory's standards could completely produce it. As for reducing the size of the video cameras and cameras, this wasn't something that needed to be done at the moment. Therefore, the research on cameras by some students at the academy had been put aside by Rinpoche. Currently, the academy was conducting research on the theory and some technical reserves of airplanes. The reason why airships weren't developed was that there were too many ferocious beasts in the sky. It would be better if they were airplanes since they were flexible and mobile. If a clumsy airship that was full of goods and people appeared in the sky, it would probably be destroyed by the ferocious beasts in less than half a day. This is an internal combustion engine from the first to the fourth generation. There are also different models, such as tractors and trucks. This is a steam engine that ranges from trains to mines. These are some things on airplanes that you don't need to know. Tong Lan opened the warehouses one by one and showed everyone around. From time to time, she had to stop and wait for those people. Although they weren't happy with Tong Lan's attitude, everyone was still very interested in the things in the warehouses. Did you guys make those things? Someone asked curiously. If this was the case, then the students of the Black Bamboo Academy were really impressive. However, they seemed to be more suitable as craftsmen. Steam engines and steam trains are, but tractors and trucks aren't. At most, we only made some assistance. Tong Lan walked out of the last warehouse and twisted her body. All the joints in her body made a sound as if her body was exploding from top to bottom. This was a small movement of Tong Lan's body, just like a normal person stretching. Little friend, I'm very interested in the physics that you talked about. Can you talk more about it? Ning Chongqing asked gently. Tong Lan immediately felt that this old man was really annoying. At night, a few students from the academy were communicating together. When they talked about the demons and monsters they saw during the day, someone was immediately astonished. Why did I hear that they came to this world from another world? I was also very curious about whether there were really other worlds. However, when I saw those words later, I believed it. Weren't they captured from the other side of the mountain? I heard that there are many such strange human-like beings after crossing the mountain to the west. Why did I hear that they were robots? Didn't they fall from the sky? Then, they were captured to give lectures. The students from the academy looked at each other blankly. Where did those strange creatures come from? Go and ask the others. After asking around, everyone was even more at a loss. More than 20 academies had heard more than 20 stories of different origins. This bunch of fellows is full of lies. Someone scolded through gritted teeth. At this point, only fools would not realize that they had been cheated. Who said that the Aboriginals were all straightforward? The next time they saw them, they would break their legs. A bunch of liars. Then, another question arose. Where did those strange creatures come from? Just like on Earth, when one saw a person with 6 arms and 2 faces, one would be curious about where they came from. Then, one would use one's imagination. It was the same for these students from the Yun Nation. First, set a small goal, for example, 1 second. Chapter 1045. I wish everyone a happy new year. May we grow old together and live happily ever after. Wrong, we are all a bunch of single dogs. Happy New Year instead. Academic progress. Abundant financial resources. Good health. Everything goes according to plan. The pretty boy of the Empress's family, Happy New Year currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1046. In the valley, there was a waterfall flowing down. Not far away, there were 3 thatched cottages, and one of them was occupied by a man and a woman. The man had thick eyebrows and big eyes. Although he was wearing coarse clothes, he was full of heroic spirit. The woman had a graceful figure and a beautiful appearance. Her hands were sewing and patching. From time to time, she would raise her head to look at the man who was doing carpentry work not far away. Her eyes were filled with gentleness. A loud and clear eagle cry rang out from the sky, causing the 2 people below to stop what they were doing. Row air, get ready. We have guests. The man laughed loudly. The woman who was called Row was just like her name. Every move she made was filled with gentleness. She gave off the feeling that she was a delicate flower that needed to be taken care of. Hearing these words, he first looked at the entrance of the valley, only to see a figure stepping on the branches of the trees, moving up and down as he approached. After taking a look, he turned around to boil water. Brother Fonga. Sister-in-law. The newcomer was a thin man wearing a fur coat. He somersaulted a few times in the air and landed in front of the thatched hut. He greeted the 2 of them. So it's Brother Yang. It must have been a cold journey. The valiant man was called Yifonga. His name was free and easy, and so was his personality. Elder brother's place is still the best. It's snowing heavily outside, and this place is like spring all year round. The mountain path is also difficult, and there are no outsiders to disturb us. The person who came flung his fur coat to the side and sighed in admiration. If you like it, then stay for a few more days. We can drink and chat merrily. Yifonga laughed heartily. The newcomer also laughed, but there was a hint of malice in his laughter. Yifonga immediately sensed the hidden meaning in his expression. The smile on his face didn't fade as he asked, "What happened? Do you have tea? I really miss the taste of your 2 tea trees." "It's still burning," the woman said with a smile from nearby. "Have a seat first." Yifonga invited him to sit down. A moment later, the tea was served. The newcomer calmly drank a cup of tea and was about to speak when the woman beat him to it and said, "It was not easy for the 2 of us to leave that Jianghu. You know how we feel. We don't want to go back." This sentence set the tone. If anyone came to see his elder brother, he would welcome them. You are also welcome to stay for a few days. However, if there was something that would implicate the 2 of them, then there was no need to say anything. The newcomer smiled bitterly. "I'm here to warn you." Their expressions immediately turned serious. In the past few years, there have been endless disturbances outside, and it's getting more and more intense. Now, It seemed that the experts on the list were unavoidable. Even though my brother and sister-in-law have retired from Jianghu, they are still on the list. Someone is looking for the two of you, the person said slowly. What happened? A few years ago, an organization appeared in Jianghu. It's called Going Home, the man said. Over the years, we've been gathering experts from all over the place, either through threats or promises. We've managed to recruit most of the top experts. Who could do such a thing? Yifanga's expression changed slightly. It should be known that none of the experts on the ranking list were easy to get along with, yet someone had managed to recruit most of the experts. It was terrifying. As far as I know, Li Yuanzhu, Ma Hongyu, Su Gongso, Lin Dong, and the others are among them. Yifanga could no longer maintain his composure and revealed a shocked expression. One had to know that these people were the top experts in the world, yet they were all in the same organization. When did this happen? What are they trying to do? About 6 years ago, not long after my brother retired. Li Yuanzhu chased after Su Xianxian. Su Xianxian died and Luohua sect was exterminated. The Tianmen sect, which had been entangled with Blood River Demon for decades, was also destroyed. Other than Blood River Demon, Xiao 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 and Murong Qing were also involved. Now, 60 to 70% of the world's experts have joined that organization. As the person spoke, Yifanga and Shan Ro's expressions became more and more surprised. They have been investigating the whereabouts of those unknown experts, including my brother and sister-in-law. When I heard this news, I hurried over to inform you. Even though not many people know where my brother is living in seclusion, it's not impossible to find him. It's better to plan ahead. The person thought for a while and simply said, "It's best to go to a place that even I don't know about." Hearing this, Shan Ro's expression relaxed slightly. Yifanga's face also showed gratitude. "Brother Yang, did they not find you?" Shan Ro asked. Of course they found them. Fortunately, a few good friends were there and helped me to force them to retreat. The sect master of Huabing Sword Tower, Jiang Zixi, also contacted some experts. Now that I've attracted a lot of their attention, I found an opportunity to remind the two of you. After leaving this place, I want to go to Huabing Sword Tower. Jiang Zixi was the sect master of Huabing Sword Tower. His nickname was Double Ringed, also known as Double Ringed Sword. He was an expert second only to Li Yuanzhu and Qi Zixiao. Therefore, with a single call, he gathered a large group of experts at Huabing Sword Tower. What do they want to do? There is a rumor in Jianghu that the human race was not originally here, but was stranded here after a war with the foreign tribes. Their goal, like their name, is to return home. Yifanga and Shan Ro immediately understood. Regardless of whether this was true or not, even if it was true, not everyone would be willing to be involved in this matter. They vainly tried to recruit the world's experts and were either friends or enemies. Using threats and promises, they naturally incurred public anger. How many of the world's famous experts were willing to follow the lead of others? As a result, the experts who were unwilling to join the group responded to Jiang Zixi's call, forming another major force. Shan Ro thought for a moment. She knew that this person did not simply tell the two of them to hide. He probably came with the intention of persuading the two of them to leave the mountain. However, she had made her stance clear from the beginning. As long as she did not relent, the other party would not mention this matter again. Thinking of this, Shan Ro smiled at the person who came. "Thank you, Brother Yang, for informing us of this matter. The two of us will have to discuss this. If it doesn't work out, we will find an island outside the East Sea to live in seclusion. It's no different from this place." "That's also good." The person who came let out a long sigh. Although Jiang Zixi's strength was far from that of return home, he wanted to persuade every expert as much as possible. However, Yi Fangge and his wife had done him a great favor. He could not open his mouth. Before he came, he had thought it through. If the other party did not want to return to Jianghu, then he wished that they could live in seclusion and not be found by others. At this moment, 3 eagle cries came from the sky. Yi Fangge and Shan Ro's expressions changed. Looking up, they saw a figure stepping on the tip of a tree and arriving before them. The person who came was wearing a purple Taoist robe. She had a black crown on her head and 5 cloud-light shoes on her feet. Her eyebrows were like crescent moons and her skin was fair. She had an otherworldly aura and looked like a fairy that had descended from the heavens. Jinshan King Yi Fangge, Water Envoy Shan Ro and Lord Jinru Yanggan. This poor Taoist Li Yuanzhu greets you. The 3 people's expressions changed drastically. How did you know about this place? Thank you, Lord Jinru, for leading the way. Li Yuanzhu chuckled. Yanggan's expression turned ashen. Jingyang Street, Imperial Bakery. A figure jumped out of the bakery. Bystanders could only see a faint shadow before the figure disappeared. A young girl slowly walked out of the bakery with an inexplicable smile on her face. Fiddling with a remote control in her hand, she pressed a button. Boom! The bag in the hands of the fleeing figure in the distance suddenly exploded. Lin Chaola's eyes were squinting from her smile, but she was alarmed at the moment of the explosion. She let go of the bag and grabbed the air with both hands. Then, she stood there in a daze, looking at the many fragmented milk candies and the holes in her clothes with an aggrieved look on her face. She rolled her eyes a few times, turned around, and ran to the vicinity of the Tong residence to lie in ambush. When Tong Lan heard the explosion in the distance, she revealed a satisfied smile. Who asked you to snatch my candy? 3 times a month. Do you really think I'm made of clay? Although I can't beat you, technology is power. Miss Tong. Tong Lan looked in the direction of the voice and saw a scholar jumping and waving at her. He was from the Shaojiang Academy. Tong Lan returned to the bakery and bought a few more bags of candy. When she went out, she bumped into the scholar who was coming in. She ignored him and disappeared into the crowd. However, the moment she returned to the Tong residence, she felt a gust of wind blow by her side. The bag of candy that was tied to her waist suddenly disappeared. Oh! Lin Chaola. I'm not done with you. Tong Lan went crazy instantly. Next time, I must bring a bag of candy stuffed with sh*t with me. Who asked you to snatch my candy? Who asked you to snatch my candy? Who asked you to snatch my candy? Set a small goal first, such as 1 second. Remember, bookseller's residence. Chapter 1047. Why? Yi Fangge looked miserable. Not far from him, Shan Ro was lying on the ground. There were no injuries on the surface and her chest was heaving up and down. Her life was not in danger but she had lost consciousness. As for Yang Gan, his face was deathly pale. He tried to stand up but was powerless. This is a serious matter. If anything goes wrong, the entire human race will perish without a burial ground. If we don't do something like this, there will be too many people watching from the sidelines. Our power is too weak. This is the only way. Everyone is like this. If you are not a friend or an enemy, there is no other way. It is unreasonable. If you become an enemy, you must die. All 4 of you must die. Li Yuanzhu spoke in a flat tone. There was no sadness or other emotions in her eyes. It was as if the 3 people in front of her were like grass that could not cause any ripples in her heart. Yi Fangge's face changed. He turned his head to look at Shan Ro. If he had heard such news in the past, he would have been overjoyed. But now, his heart was filled with endless sorrow. Turning his head to look at Li Yuanzhu, Yi Fangge said in an extremely complicated tone, "It is hard to imagine that you are Li Yuanzhu. This is the road ahead of us. No one can escape." Li Yuanzhu looked at him without avoiding his gaze. "I may feel guilty towards you, but I have a clear conscience towards the greater good." "It is your greater good," Yang Gan said angrily. "You do not understand." Li Yuanzhu shook her head slightly. "In the future, you will know that when the nest is overturned, no eggs will remain intact. Now, give me an answer." Li Yuanzhu said no more. She lowered her eyelids and waited for the other party's reply. The wooden sword in her hand had disappeared. Her hands were hanging by her side. Her fingers were like bamboo shoots and her wrists were like white lotus roots. There was no trace of blood but a pair of murderous hands. Yi Fangge said helplessly, "I promise you that I can work for you." "Shan Ro, let her go. There is not much to do and it is not difficult. It is for us and for yourself. As for Shan Ro, you cannot let her go. If you join us, you will be one of us. There is still a long way to go before the war. Both of you can watch your children grow up. When the time comes, you will know what to do even without my reminder." Li Yuanzhu said plainly. Yi Fangge gritted his teeth and laughed bitterly. "What else can I do? The two of us will join you." "That's great. I don't like to kill people." Li Yuanzhu nodded and looked at Yang Gan. "What about you? You have wreaked havoc in the world, you will definitely suffer the wrath of the heavens," Yang Gan cursed. "The heavens don't care about worldly affairs. Otherwise, how could the human race have fallen to such a state? All 318 people in your Ju-Yi manor are in your hands," Li Yuanzhu said faintly. "Despicable." Yang Gan cursed angrily. He really couldn't believe that the dignified second in the world, who used to claim that she would never kill anyone, would actually threaten him with the entire morgue. Li Yuanzhu's eyelids continued to droop as if she was looking at weeds on the ground, but her aura was firmly locked onto him. "Look at this grass. It withers in the winter and revives in the spring. No matter what is above it, be it soil or rocks, it has to push its way out. It's the same for us. It's not just my life, so there's nothing we can do even if we use despicable means." Yang Gan turned his head to look at Yi Fangge. "Take care, elder brother." As soon as he finished speaking, before Yi Fangge could stop him, Yang Gan committed suicide. "Why didn't you stop him?" Yi Fangge glared angrily. "Since he wanted to die, why should I stop him?" Li Yuanzhu replied in an emotionless tone. Half a day later, Li Yuanzhu left the valley and went outside. She didn't mention the 318 people in Ju-Yi Manor again, as Yang Gan had intended. Chao Gui sat in the bookstore, feeling a little curious. There was a floor-to-ceiling window next to him, and the sunlight shone directly in, making his body hurt. There were a few ice buckets in the bookstore, but they emitted traces of cool air, making him feel extremely comfortable. This was the first time he saw a bookstore that allowed people to sit down and read books slowly. In bookstores in the Yun Nation, if one didn't buy a book, they would chase them out. Not only were there tables and chairs, but there were also ice buckets and even free ice water. One bowl of it would make one's heart feel cold and extremely comfortable. Chao Gui flipped through the book in front of him. It was different from the one in Black Bamboo Academy as it was written in Great Xiao's language. This was the best-selling book here. After flipping through it for a while, Chao Gui began to feel a little uneasy. He crossed his legs as if he was hiding something, but the book in his hands was getting more and more difficult to put down. If he flipped the book over, he would see the title, Golden Vase Plum. A godly book. After reading for more than an hour, Chao Gui closed the book and sat there in a daze for a moment. Then, he paid for it and stuffed it into his pocket. After that, he went to some shops and saw some attractive items. For example, a flashlight could emit strong light when the switch was turned on. Furthermore, it could illuminate very far. It was compact and easy to carry, and it was much better than a lantern. However, this flashlight didn't sell well in Lawn City. He had seen the night in Lawn City. There were street lights everywhere, and there were very few dark places. Naturally, he didn't need this item. However, he liked it very much and bought 2 flashlights and a few batteries, spending more than 1 tael of silver. After walking around for a while, he saw Aborigines selling all kinds of strange things in the mountains on the street. He also saw a few people gathering together to smoke a poisonous scorpion, with an intoxicated look on their faces. Finally, he saw a restaurant with the words Shanhui written on it and immediately walked in. The students from the Saltao Academy still owed him a drink, but since he had seen it now, he might as well go in and sit for a while. Many people noticed him as soon as he entered. After all, most of the people here were the descendants of Aboriginal officials, and the merchants from the Yun Nation didn't come here. However, it wasn't a secret that many scholars from the Yun Nation came to Black Bamboo Academy. These descendants of officials were well informed, so no one went to find trouble with him. They allowed him to find a table in the corner, sit down, and chat happily. Chao Gue ordered a pot of wine and a plate of meat. He sat there and listened to the conversations of others. After listening for a long time, he heard a lot of things, which made him feel that this trip was worthwhile. However, not long after, he saw a little girl who looked like she was carved with jade poking her head in and sneakily looking around. Then, she jumped in and punched the waiter in the eye. Although he was a waiter, he wasn't easy to deal with. After being punched for no reason, he waved his big fist and was about to retaliate. However, when he saw who it was, he immediately let out an ouch. "Were you the one who snitched the last time?" Honeysuckle was furious. She grabbed the waiter's collar and punched his eye a few times. The surrounding people recognized this little girl and immediately burst into laughter. "Little princess, are you here to drink again?" "Ouch, little ancestor, those two have spoken. How could we dare to let you drink here?" The waiter hurriedly begged for mercy. It wasn't that he was afraid of pain, nor was there any other reason. He just liked this little princess. "I don't care. You're a traitor. You caused me to be captured last time." Honeysuckle didn't care about that. After punching their eye sockets until they looked like pandas, she jumped onto an empty table and asked, "Is anyone treating me to a drink?" "Since the little princess has spoken, how would we dare to not do so? Serve the little princess some wine. It's on us." Someone immediately laughed. Honeysuckle was overjoyed when she heard that. She looked around the shop and landed in front of Chao Gue in a flash. "I've never seen you before. You look strange." Honeysuckle was puzzled. The person in front of him was completely different from the burly men he had seen in the past. Chao Gue heard what everyone said just now and roughly guessed the identity of the person in front of him. However, he was a little puzzled. It was said that the current princess was only 3 years old. Why did she look like she was 8 or 9 years old? Although he was puzzled, he smiled and said, "Although we've never met before, I know your identity." "How do you know?" Honeysuckle was even more puzzled. However, the others looked over coldly. This was the current princess. If this scholar from the Yun Nation didn't know what was good for him, then he would be thrown into the smelly ditch to accompany the maggots. "Do you want to make a bet?" Chao Gue ignored the others and smiled. Everyone's expression turned even colder. Was this guy trying to deceive the princess? "I won't do it. They all know who I am." Honeysuckle wasn't old, but she wasn't as gullible as others thought. She felt that someone must have told him who she was. Honeysuckle rolled her eyes and said, "Why don't we make a bet on who can drink first?" Chao Gui was stunned. Then, he smiled and said, "I'll do as you say." Even if he guessed wrong, this person was only 8 or 9 years old. If he guessed correctly, he was only 3 years old. Judging from everyone's reaction just now, it should be fine to drink with her. At the very least, he wouldn't be captured and beheaded. Everyone was stunned for a moment. Then, their gazes became strange. "What if you lose?" Honeysuckle suddenly asked. Chao Gui looked at her with a smile. He really didn't think that he would lose to her. Even a burly aboriginal might not be able to defeat him, let alone a little girl like her. "What do you think?" Chao Gui teased her. "Call me Dad." Honeysuckle immediately stood on the stool and announced loudly. "What? Call me Dad?" Honeysuckle pointed at herself and couldn't hide the excitement on her face. Baidu search 881 Chinese website yen. No advertising words. Chapter 1048. Let me tell you something. Renbochin poked the Empress's waist with his finger, but there was no response. He used all his strength to poke the Empress's waist twice. If it were concrete, he would have poked 2 holes in it. Finally, he managed to divert the Empress's attention. "Itchy!" The Empress slapped his hand away. "Don't touch me. We are an old couple now." Renbochin pulled the Empress into his arms and kissed her on the cheek. Not far away, Qing Yuan and Hong Wuan covered their mouths and giggled. They found it very interesting to look at these two every day. "What do you want to say?" the Empress asked helplessly. "Well, you should be mentally prepared first." Renbochin's expression was very strange and complicated. "You talk too much. What's the matter? You have leveled up and become a grandmother." Renbochin said in a very sorrowful tone, as if the child had finally grown up. The Empress was at a loss. "What are you talking about? You have a grandson." Renbochin changed the way he phrased it. "Oh." The Empress nodded her head gently. After 10 seconds, she finally reacted and raised her voice. "What did you say? What happened?" Hua is a father." Renbochin finally stopped teasing the Empress. When he recalled what he had just heard, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She forced people to call her father and even beat them up. In an instant, the Empress's expression became extremely wonderful. It was as if a flower had bloomed. Renbochin then recounted what happened in Shanhui House. When he sent someone to capture Hua, he also brought back what happened inside. After listening to him, the Water Empress was silent for a while, and then she said, "Kill him." Renbochin waved his hand and said, "There's no need. The other party didn't do it on purpose. I had my suspicions before, but I sent someone to inquire about the situation in detail. I also sent someone to inquire about this person's past. It should be a coincidence." He didn't think much of it at first. He was just teasing her. She was the one who suggested the bet. He didn't expect that she could keep drinking. I heard that he was about to cry. Hua even punched him a few times and forced him to call him daddy. The Empress's expression softened a little. She squinted at Renbochin and asked, "Is this what you taught him? What does it have to do with me?" Renbochin spread his hands. "Otherwise, why don't you call me mom or grandma?" The Empress sneered. This was indeed a question worth pondering. "Where's Hua?" "She is being punished to copy the Analects of Confucius." Chao Gui woke up from his coma and felt as if his throat was on fire. He staggered to the ground and gulped down the bowl of water on the table. Only then did he feel better. "Brother Chao. Awake?" What happened last night? If someone hadn't picked you up outside, you'd probably be sleeping outside for the whole night. Also, who hit your eyes? A scholar pushed open the door and came in. Seeing that he was awake, he immediately asked. Recalling what happened last night, Chao Gui immediately covered his face. He confirmed that the other party was indeed the current princess, a 3-year-old girl. He was actually forced to call her father. Although he was willing to admit defeat, Chao Gui didn't think he was a sore loser. However, when the little princess saw his hesitation, she immediately gave him 2 punches. In the end, it was as if he was beaten to the point of calling her father, and she was just a 3-year-old girl. At the thought of this, Chao Gui felt like killing himself. Don't ask about this, Chao Gui said gloomily. The other party didn't say much after seeing him like this. We are setting off in a while. There will be a lecture in a while. We will do it tomorrow. Is it all right for you to speak? Chao Gui rubbed the dark circles under his eyes and let out a wry smile. Do I look like I'm okay? Let Hualong or Yuan Pei speak. This is a great opportunity. The scholar said with a smile. It was a great opportunity to show his face in front of the various academies and the high-ranking officials of Dayo. Forget it. Chao Gui waved his hand. He wished he could cover his face when he went out. Law is the compilation of maps and records, which are set up in the government and distributed to the people. Don't rely on others for your good, and don't use them for wrong. Don't rely on others for your good, and don't use them for wrong within the borders. Don't use people for wrong, and one country can make all. For the sake of governance, use the masses and abandon the few. Therefore, don't focus on virtue but on law. Renbaqian listened to the scholar who was standing on the stage in front of him speak with fervor and assurance. This seems to be the doctrine of legalism. It wasn't strange for this world to develop doctrines similar to legalism. Not to mention the inexplicable connection between this world and Earth, the essence of every world and every period was similar. It wasn't strange for ideas similar to the 100 schools of thought to appear. On the stage were students from Jiangling Academy. This academy was famous for advocating law. In the future, the new laws would be revised, and the students from this academy would be of some use. Renbaqian valued this academy quite a lot. Although the laws on Earth were more complete, each period had its own characteristics, and the laws on Earth might not be suitable for this world. Currently, his Black Bamboo Academy was focusing all its energy on promoting technology and naturally didn't have the time to care about other aspects. These academies could be used as a supplement. This was also the reason why he invited so many academies this time. The world doesn't have a finger, and nothing can be called a thing. If it doesn't point to the world, then what can it be called a finger? If it points to what the world doesn't have, then what can it be called a finger? If it points to what the world doesn't have, then it can't be. These were students from Zhouwu Academy and were known for their eloquence. They advocated emphasizing the relationship between name and reality, which was essentially a form of logic. Unfortunately, they were debating philosophical issues that had nothing to do with politics. The biggest characteristic of the students of this academy was sophistry, but their biggest weakness was that they only knew how to use sophistry. They didn't have the means to maneuver and weren't good at lobbying like the school of vertical and horizontal. As a result, although this academy was famous in the Yun nation, it was famous for sophistry and didn't have much influence. In fact, it had been declining over the years. Most of the students from Jitai Academy were women, and their expertise in theory caught Renbaqian's attention. They were good at collecting all kinds of gossip, big and small news, and compiling them into a compilation. At the same time, they were also good at compiling ballads that were spread among the people. Although their status wasn't high, they were very useful. Whether it was in court or in business, there were opportunities for them to show their skills. According to Rinpoche, they could guide the opinions of the people, collect information at the same time, and create a favorable market orientation. As a result, the women from Jitai Academy were quite useful, especially for those merchants or families. If they married a woman from Jitai Academy, she would be of great use in many places. Shaojiang Academy was good at economics and advocated, when the country is rich, people from afar will come. When the land is established, the people will stay. When the granaries are full, they will know etiquette. When they have enough food and clothing, they will know honor and disgrace. At the same time, they were proficient in mathematics. The scholars from Shaojiang Academy could master a certain area and volume calculation method, a certain proportion theory, and mathematical tools such as the Pythagorean theorem. On the other hand, Baikuan Academy was good at medicine, divination, astrology, and physiognomy. Not to mention the latter three, they had produced many famous doctors. At the same time, the students of Baikuan Academy were also quite good at mathematics. Fenghu Academy, which was one of the 5 major academies along with General Academy, Shaojiang Academy, and Baikuan Academy, knew a little of everything but was proficient in nothing. They were good at everything. As for Wangjing Academy, Rinpoche was about to doze off after listening for a while. If there was a Confucian school in this world, then the students of Wangjing Academy were undoubtedly the rotten scholars. 3 days of lectures passed in a flash, and the last one was Black Bamboo Academy. After all, they had the honor of being the host. The previous visits had broadened the horizons of the other academies, so they were the finale. The one on stage was Shiryu, and the content of his lecture caused a huge uproar. The content of Shiryu's lecture was the theory of the flat earth. Faced with the shock of the crowd, Shiryu was already prepared and immediately threw out a few methods to prove it. The first was the arc of the sea. Using the mast of a ship as a reference was the simplest and most clear method. The second was the full moon, the waning moon, and the dim moon. The third was the shadow. 2 rods were separated by a certain distance to produce a shadow. If the world was flat, no matter how far apart the 2 rods were, the shadow would be the same. On the other hand, it proved that the ground was curved. Finally, Shiryu directly used his ultimate move to raise a hot air balloon. Since words don't make sense, then go up to the sky and see for yourself. Shiryu shrugged and spread out his hands. Up to the sky. That's right, up to the sky. You will understand when you are in the sky. There was another uproar below. At this point, most of the academies knew that Dayo actually had a tool that allowed people to fly. Chapter 1049. Hot air balloons weren't a big deal for the first few batches of students at Black Bamboo Academy, but the students in the last 2 years hadn't seen them much. There were too many ferocious beasts in the sky, unlike on Earth where there were mostly small birds, and golden eagles with wingspans of 2 meters were rare. Giant beasts with wingspans of more than 10 meters were often seen in the sky of this world. They were at the man-will level and could reach the earth-will level. Such a sky was extremely dangerous for most people. Only spirit-will experts had the ability to protect themselves in the sky. Therefore, Rinpoche wasn't prepared to promote hot air balloons in this world. After making hot air balloons for Li Fu, the other 2 hot air balloons in the academy were made by Li Fu. Even the last few batches of students hadn't seen them before, let alone the people of the Yun Nation. It was already the morning of the next day, and everyone was eagerly watching the students of Black Bamboo Academy prepare the hot air balloons outside the city. The weather was beautiful. Although the sun was blazing, there wasn't much wind. After 2 hours, the hot air balloon was ready, the brazier below the hot air balloon was lit, and a few students were chosen to go up. The others looked around enviously. As time passed, the hot air balloon gradually expanded. It's up, Everyone stared at the hot air balloon as it gradually left the ground until the rope below it snapped straight. "Senior, thank you for your trouble." Ren Bachin greeted Li Fu. "When is your daughter going to learn martial arts from me?" Li Fu squatted down and looked at the hot air balloon and then at Ren Bachin. "I can't forget." "How old is she?" 3 years old. Ren Bachin raised 3 fingers to emphasize. "How does she look like she's 3 years old?" Li Fu smacked his lips. "That's still 3 years old." Ren Bachin reiterated. Li Fu sighed faintly. In any case, he was the most powerful expert in the world. In order to teach that little girl, he didn't even have the title of master and disciple. He even had to beg him to teach her. "I'll have to trouble you to take care of those students. If anything happens, bring Shiryu back alive." Ren Bachin reiterated his request. "Pfft, your students are lives, but others aren't." Li Fu spat and didn't care about his image at all. "All right, I'm going up." Li Fu couldn't be bothered to listen to what Ren Bachin had to say and strolled to the bottom of the hot air balloon. Before the others could see clearly, they saw that there was an extra person in the basket below the hot air balloon. "Isn't this the gatekeeper of the Black Bamboo Academy? He's actually an expert." Many students only knew that this person was very powerful, but they did not know exactly how powerful he was. On the contrary, those Earthwill experts were aghast. They couldn't even see the other party's movements clearly. How strong was he exactly? The people below loosened the rope, and the hot air balloon slowly rose into the sky. The few people standing on the hot air balloon could not hide their excitement. In fact, apart from Shiryu and Li Fu, only 4 students could fly into the sky. However, the hearts of the people below were surging with excitement, and their eyes were shining. It wasn't until the hot air balloon had become a small dot in everyone's eyes that many people's necks were sore and swollen that they retracted their gazes. Trucks, tractors, and trains were the 3 most powerful forms of transportation on land. Now, there was a tool that could carry people into the sky. Many people looked at him. This Xiao Prince consort was truly a celestial being. At this rate, they did not know what Deo would look like in 10 or 20 years. After more than an hour, the hot air balloon slowly descended from the sky again. It actually rose and fell from the same place without deviating from its position at all. Many students who had never been to the sky didn't know what the problem was and thought that it was just like that. Only Ren Bachin and a few other students knew that this was because of Li Fu. This ingenious use of power was worthy of being called a top expert in the world. "Brother Jihua, how do you feel? How does it feel to look from the sky? Can you see the celestial palace?" As soon as everyone came down, they were immediately surrounded by people. One of them was Su Jihua from the Jiangling Academy. "Wait. Wretch." Su Jihua's face turned pale, and he quickly raised his hand to stop the crowd from approaching. He couldn't hold it in any longer and vomited on the spot. As the second group of people rose into the sky in the hot air balloon, the few people who had finally recovered began to answer the questions of the others. Naturally, there was no celestial palace. Looking down from the sky was similar to looking down from the top of a mountain. Cold. They had always thought that the higher they went, the closer they were to the sun, and the hotter it would be. They didn't expect that the higher they went, the colder it would be. Most importantly, there was another problem. Su Jihua had a complicated look on his face as he said, "The earth is indeed curved." Su Jihua didn't say that the earth was round, but that it was curved. However, this was enough to explain some problems. The higher they went, the further away the horizon was. Although it could be seen from the mountains, it wasn't as visually impactful as the horizon getting further and further away as they went up in the hot air balloon. No matter how much they didn't want to admit it, they had to admit that the earth was indeed curved. The question was the Earth a circle or a semicircle? No matter how much they struggled with this point, at least Shiryu and the others had achieved their goal. As for whether it was a circle or a semicircle, in this world where it was difficult to circumnavigate the world, it was impossible to get everyone's approval in a short period of time. On the contrary, Renbochin had some ideas. It was about time to start exploring the situation overseas. He didn't know what the turbulent zone was like. What other dangers were there in the sea? What kind of scenery would he see after crossing the sea? Although Renbochin wanted to find out, he knew that things had to be done step by step. He had to settle this group of students first, then try to collect as much information as possible about the sea, and then design and build ships. Renbochin pondered his ideas as he returned to the city. The hot air balloon's ascent outside the city hadn't ended yet. According to the plan, there were still 2 more groups of people, but he didn't have that much time to wait. Not long after he entered the city, someone caught up from behind and asked to see Renbochin. Students from Wangjing Academy. Renbochin wasn't very interested after hearing who it was. He wasn't interested in this academy at all. However, he could give the other party a chance and listen to what he had to say. Renbochin found a restaurant, ordered people to clear the 2nd floor, and sat at a table to wait for the guards to bring the person up. Changlu greets Your Highness. The person who came was a young man in his 20s. The deepest impression that Renbochin had was his pair of eyes that were like reptiles, emitting a gloomy aura. Although he stood respectfully in front of Renbochin, he was like a venomous snake that could bite him at any time. If you have anything to say, say it. Renbochin didn't let the other party sit down. Instead, he poured himself a cup of tea, took a sip, and said faintly, Your Highness, Wangjing Academy is rotten to the core. Changlu's words made Renbochin slightly interested. Continue. Seeing that he was interested, Changlu's confidence was boosted, and she felt that this trip was a success. As Changlu explained, Renbochin gradually understood the other party's intentions. Although Changlu's first sentence made Renbochin a little interested, the rest of the content was lackluster. It was nothing more than Wangjing Academy being controlled by a group of old teachers, and it exuded a rotten smell from top to bottom. Although it was still the head of the 5 major academies in name, its reputation was declining day by day. Changlu's uncle was the mountain chief of Wangjing Academy, below the dean and above the ordinary teachers. This time, he didn't send these students to compete with the other academies, but to let Renbochin understand the current situation of the academy. He wanted to use Renbochin's leadership to implement reforms, sweep away those rotten old fellows, and correct the style of learning. Simply put, he wanted to use Renbochin's hands to seize power. No need to say more. Renbochin waved his hand and didn't even bother to listen to the other party's report. The other party was relying on the reputation of one of the 5 major academies and felt that he would care about this academy. Previously, he had already learned about the various academies, such as Shaojiang Academy and Jiangling Academy, which were indeed useful and worthy of the title of the 5 major academies. However, what they learned in Wangjing Academy was suitable for the Yun nation's written examinations, but it was no longer suitable for this fast-developing era. 5 major academies. Forget it. Although those old fellows in the academy exuded a rotten smell, Changlu's uncle wasn't a good person either. He actually wanted to use Renbochin to seize power. And he even sent these 7 students. If it weren't for these 7 people, Renbochin would at most ignore them and let them gradually fall behind this era before finally being buried in the dust. However, after looking at the examination papers of these students, Renbochin had already made up his mind. This academy, which was hostile to the aboriginals, had no value at all. The reputation of the 5 major academies was worthless in front of him. It's time for Wangjing Academy to become history. There will be no such academy in the future. Renbochin got up and left after saying this. He didn't even have the mood to listen to what the other party had to say. He felt that his time had been wasted. Since there was an empty spot in the 5 major academies, it was better to use Shitai Academy. As for the people from Wangjing Academy and the scholars who had graduated from that academy, how would they react? Renbochin didn't care at all. If they dared to cause trouble, he would behead them. By limiting the scope to Wangjing Academy, the other scholars would certainly have some reaction, but it could also be limited to a certain range. It was better than keeping a group of writers who were hostile to the imperial court. Chang Lu was stunned and flustered. Your Highness. However, before he could chase after them, he was blocked by the guards. First, set a small goal, such as 1 second. Remember, Scholar House. Chapter 1050. I'll update it tomorrow night. The pretty boy of the Empress's family, apologies, I have something to attend to and will be taking 2 days off. Currently typing, please wait a moment. After the content has been updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest update. Chapter 1051. Chang Lu was in disbelief. He didn't expect Renbochin to ban Wangjing Academy. Wangjing Academy had a history of hundreds of years. Even though it wasn't as powerful as it used to be, it still had a huge influence in the Yun nation. Furthermore, it affected the literati. Since ancient times, literati had been the group that the imperial court cared about the most. Literati could enter the imperial court and enlighten the common people. They also had the prestige and ability to influence the people. Wangjing Academy naturally played an important role in this regard. Because of this and the huge influence and value of Wangjing Academy, Chang Lu had always believed that as long as he explained his intentions, he would definitely receive support. At that time, the Chang family would be able to take charge of this influential academy with hundreds of years of history. As one of the 5 great academies, publicly supporting the Dayo imperial court was presumably what the other party needed. However, he didn't expect that the other party would only say, "It's time to wipe out history," and not say anything else. If Wangjing Academy was banned, wouldn't the other party know how much turmoil it would cause and how many literati would denounce it? However, this was only the opinion of him and the Chang family. If it were in the previous dynasties, this would indeed be the case. However, in Renbochin's opinion, it was a different matter. Although Wangjing Academy could indeed set off some waves, it would only cause some waves and wouldn't affect the overall situation. Although literati were influential, there was another group of people with equally great influence in the Yun nation, the merchants, or rather, the chambers of commerce. These people were the ones who could truly influence the food, clothing, housing, and transportation of the common people and thus affect everything in the Yun nation. The Yun nation was different from Dayo. Dayo didn't have merchants and the people bartered because Dayo was already backward. As long as the imperial court could guarantee the supply of salt and iron to the people, it would be fine. The Yun nation was a prosperous commercial society. For farmers, they had to rely on merchants to buy and sell food, clothes, and groceries. As for the commoners in the city, they were hired by the Chamber of Commerce to work for them. Many people had been working for the same Chamber of Commerce for generations. Everyone could live without contact with words, poems, and essays, but it was impossible not to come into contact with merchants, a group that extended their reach in all aspects. His influence on the merchants was naturally needless to say. Knives, policies, and transportation. It could be said that he could kill any merchant or chamber of commerce if he wanted them to. With his knowledge from the modern world and his identity, it was a piece of cake for him to kill a merchant or chamber of commerce. In modern society, it was easy for a highly centralized government to target an enterprise, let alone in this feudal society. In such a situation, he did not even need a knife. He only needed to give a signal, and through the Chamber of Commerce and his family, he could control the life and death of those literati who jumped out. For example, they couldn't even buy a grain of rice or a grain of salt. Of course, he wouldn't do that. He would be criticized by others. At the end of the day, Wangjing Academy was only one of the 5 great academies. So what if it was banned? Although there would be some disturbance, it wouldn't affect the overall situation. As for what the other party was thinking, they were thinking too much. The next morning, many academies found that one of the courtyards was empty. The people from Wangjing Academy were gone. Many people were shocked. Their first reaction was to wonder if they had offended someone and the people from Wangjing College were killed. In Dayo, this was perfectly normal. In an instant, everyone quivered. Fortunately, someone quickly informed them that the people from Wangjing Academy had been sent back. As for the reason, no one said. Everyone was bewildered and didn't know what had happened. They could only suppress their emotions for now. The first thing to do was to respond to Zhao Prince Consort's summons. Now that the test papers had been answered, the Black Bamboo Academy had been visited, and the lecture was over, it was time to get down to business. Although the process wasn't quite the same as what they had imagined, everyone imagined that this trip would be to showcase the students of each academy, surpass the other academies, and gain the greatest honor to enter the eyes of the imperial court. However, they weren't given much of a chance to showcase themselves. Even though it was a 3-day lecture, only Zhao Prince Consort attended. On the contrary, they were the ones who gave the unknown Black Bamboo Academy a fright. Until now, everyone was still guessing what was going on with the demons and monsters in Black Bamboo Academy. However, after receiving the summons, everyone knew that the final moment was coming. However, to their surprise, what awaited them wasn't a summons. Instead, they were transported out of the city by trucks. "Cousin Ching, do you think they're going to kill all of us?" Someone whispered. "I don't think so." The person who was questioned immediately turned pale. Everyone else also tensed up. If it was someone else, they definitely wouldn't do that. However, if it was the Aboriginal barbarians, it would be hard to say. "Don't worry. I asked them earlier, and from what I heard, they are going to the new city." A student who was resting opened his eyes and said. "New city?" Everyone was puzzled. The construction of the new city wasn't a secret in Lon City, and many of the merchants from the Yun Nation had heard about it. However, these scholars had never heard of it before. Why are they going there? What followed was a deep sense of doubt. "You will know when you get there." That student closed his eyes and rested again. At this moment, Rinpoche was sitting in a car with a gratified look on his face. He didn't expect to sit in a car in this world so soon. This was a handmade product of the laboratory. There were a total of 5 cars, 2 of which were kept in the laboratory as reference, and the other 3 were sent to the palace. Sitting in this car was at least much more comfortable than sitting in the Crow General. Tonglan, Zhu Hua, and 2 flowers were squeezed in the back seat. "Yague, why are you bringing them to the new city?" Tonglan took out a few candies and threw them to 2 flowers and Zhu Hua with a playful look on her face. She didn't have a good impression of the people from the Yun Nation. "Have you been to the new city?" Ren Baqian asked. "I went there a few years ago." Tonglan complained. "I would like to see it if you gave me less homework." "Ha!" Ren Baqian chuckled. "It's impossible to give you less homework. You are lucky that you don't have more homework. If you didn't have that homework, how could you guys, who only have muscles for brains, get to where you are today? You will know how spectacular and shocking the new city is when you go there," Ren Baqian said casually. And then, Although these students from the Yun Nation don't have much ability in science and technology, they are still capable as grassroots and even middle-level officials. If there aren't enough Aboriginal officials, they will have to make up for it. What does this have to do with letting them go to the new city? It's to let them see a whole new world so that they don't put in the effort or have other schemes, Renbachian said concisely. In fact, this was only part of the reason. This was a unique city, and he needed to spread the news of this city to the entire Yun Nation through the mouths of these people. These students from the Yun Nation were only the first batch. Next, there would be chambers of commerce and various families from the Yun Nation. Not only did he want to use this city to change people's impression of Deo, but he also needed people to enrich this new city. It couldn't be that this city would be empty when the capital was moved, right? As for Lon City, it would be the transportation hub of Deo in the future. Not only could it not be emptied, but it would also need to be filled in the future. I'm sorry, my readers. Something unexpected happened, and the original 2-day trip became 5 days. This is the update, and there will be more updates starting today. Baidu search 081 Chinese Network Yen. No advertising messages. Chapter 1052. No one knew why Zhao Prince Consort brought them to the new city. Even the deans of the various academies couldn't figure it out. However, when the brand new city came closer, many students stood up from the trucks, held onto the railings on both sides, and looked into the distance with their mouths wide open. There are no city walls. Many people found it unbelievable. That's right, there were no city walls. Unlike other cities, the first thing one could see from afar was the city walls. As for this city, the first thing that could be seen was the towering stone pillars in the distance, which made one feel quite confused. However, when they got closer, the most surprising thing was that there were no city walls and they could see the scenery inside the city. They probably think that no enemy can get close to this city. It's really incredible that there's no defense at all. After all, this is the hinterland of Deo. Aren't they worried that someone will rebel? Although Qi Zixiao is the third most powerful person in the world, that doesn't mean that her descendants are the same. Her daughter was born with the strength of an earth will expert. Maybe she'll be stronger than her when she grows up. No matter how strong she is, she can't resist an army of 1 million soldiers, right? Maybe the city walls haven't been built yet. They should build the interior first before building the city walls. Many people agreed with this. However, this city is so big. I didn't feel it from afar, but now that I'm closer, there are buildings everywhere I look. What a big city. It's much bigger than Lon City. Someone suddenly realized something. Could this be the new capital? Are they moving the capital? Now that you mention it, it's possible. After all, this is the hinterland, less than half a day's journey from Lon City. It's surrounded by plains, and there are waterways. Transportation is more convenient than in Lon City. In addition, the city is 10 times bigger than Lon City. Maybe they really want to move the capital. While everyone was discussing, the city with countless stone pillars arrived in front of them, and they began to enter the city. Everyone's first impression was that it was big, wide, and majestic. The road was at least 30 feet wide. The widest road in Wangjing was only 10 feet wide, but the road in this city was actually 30 feet wide. In addition to the 30 feet wide road, there were 2 roads that were 1 foot above the ground. Each road was actually 20 feet wide, adding up to a total of 140 feet. Even if a huge truck were to drive on this road, it would still seem extremely small. Ren Baqian looked satisfied in the car. It was a total of 37 meters, with a 2-meter-wide green belt in the middle and 2 7-meter-wide sidewalks on both sides. His design was based on a bustling modern city. Although such a wide road might seem unnecessary now, it would become a foresight in 20 or 30 years. Everyone entered from the north gate. This area had been completely constructed, including water pipes, cable pipes, and even underground space for a subway. Renbachian's request was not to place the cables in the air. Naturally, he wouldn't install trams on the ground either. There were simply too many people who liked to climb and jump high. Among the group of top experts in Great Xia, there were a few who would jump onto electric poles and look into the distance when they had nothing better to do. The Aboriginal experts also had this hobby. Not long after Lawn City was electrified, a few people were seriously injured. If it weren't for the Aboriginals' good physique, the fact that they were at the earth-will level, which made them more resistant to electricity, and the fact that the voltage in Lawn City wasn't too high, they would have been put into the box. Even so, they were not much different from medium-rare steaks. Therefore, it was necessary to bury the cables underground. Considering that they would need to lay the network in the future, they might as well lay cement pipes so that they could repair and replace the cables through the sewers in the future. "Stop the car!" Renbachian called out to the driver. After getting out of the car, Erhua seemed to have come to a new world. He cheered and began to run around on the road. The car behind also stopped. After the driver asked Renbachian about it, everyone got out of the car. "Let's go and take a look at this new city," Renbachian said to the deans and teachers of the various academies. "What a big city, but why don't I see the city walls?" someone exclaimed in admiration before asking the doubt in his heart. "City walls. If we are attacked here, what's the point of having city walls?" "The best defense is offense," Renbachian said faintly and smiled. "Moreover, who can be Dao's enemy?" The word Great Xia appeared in everyone's mind. Or rather, it was the next dynasty of Great Xia. The current situation of Great Xia was very clear. If there were no accidents, Great Xia wouldn't last for more than a few years. As long as they recuperated for 20 years and relied on their tens of millions of people and vast territory, they would be able to rise again. With enough food, the Aboriginals can recruit 1 million elite soldiers and 100,000 winged cavalry warriors. Renbachian's words were so powerful that everyone felt a chill in their hearts. It had to be known that it only took 90,000 elite soldiers to conquer the Yun nation. 1 million elite Aboriginal soldiers. At least 10 million soldiers would be needed to contend against them. With 100,000 winged cavalry warriors and 100,000 earth-will experts, no one would be able to resist them. Even if Su Qing established a new dynasty, he wouldn't dare to declare war on Dao, Renbachian thought. These people didn't know about nuclear bombs, but he should have heard of them. "Your Highness, are these buildings on both sides all pavilions?" Someone changed the topic and asked as he looked at the stone pillars on both sides. Although they were different from traditional buildings, everyone could see the windows on those buildings that were densely distributed on the cement walls. The reason why everyone was puzzled was that these buildings were too tall and there were too many of them. As far as the eye could see, they could see a large number of stone pillars forming a stone forest, which was shocking. "That's right." Renbachian nodded and gave a brief introduction. These cement buildings were similar to the buildings of the future. They were 6 stories tall, but they were much taller than the buildings of the future. The first floor was 5 meters high, and each subsequent floor was 4 meters high, which was 1 meter higher than the usual 3 meters. The distance between the buildings was also relatively large. The reason for this height was partly due to the materials used, but there were also other reasons. Although the high-rise buildings on the periphery were inhabited by civilians, there were also many Kismet Heaven experts among them. It was possible for them to break through the floors or even the load-bearing pillars. If a couple fought at home and collapsed the building, who would believe it? However, it wasn't impossible in Dao. There was no other way because there weren't enough steel bars. Therefore, the buildings couldn't be too tall, and the outer walls couldn't be too thick. At the same time, the distance between the buildings had to be large. Of course, this wasn't high for Renbachian. For others, this was already majestic enough. Renbachian led the crowd forward, occasionally talking to the many deans behind him while the students whispered to each other. The more they looked, the more frightened and shocked they were. Big, it was really too big. Just like the previous sensory organs, every road and every building in the city was too big. The gray cement buildings looked the same, but as they stood there and stretched into the distance, it gave people a unique sense of beauty and shock. How many people can this city accommodate? More than 1 million people. Renbachian replied. This is only for now. In the future, the population may reach 10 million. Hiss. Following Renbachian's words, there was a uniform gasp. What did a population of 10 million mean? One had to know that the most prosperous capital of Great Xia only had a population of 1 million. This was the result of thousands of years of development. Wangjing only had a population of 600,000. Even so, it was difficult to supply the entire Great Xia with the surrounding food production and had to be transported from other cities. There was also another point. With such a large population and no land around, how could these people make a living? In addition to food, there were also sewage, transportation, firewood, and so on. There were too many problems in all aspects. At this thought, everyone felt that a city with a population of 10 million was simply impossible. Even a population of 1 million was completely unnecessary for the current Dayo. One had to know that Lan City only had a population of less than 100,000. However, everyone was even more puzzled as to why Zhao Prince Consort brought them here. Even if they wanted to relocate people, there was nothing they could do. The students at the back didn't think so much. One by one, they sized up this huge and empty city and were all speechless. It was simply too spectacular. Everyone felt as if they had fallen into a modern steel jungle. They were shocked as they looked around. This was a futuristic scene. Baidu search 081 Chinese network yen. No advertising slogans. Chapter 1053. Why are you acting so weird today? Ma Hualong patted Chao Gui's back with a surprised look on his face. It's rare to see you like this. Chao Gui looked away from the bouncing girl in the distance and pretended that nothing had happened. It's nothing. Nothing. Ma Hualong looked at him and then at the girl in the distance. You seem to have been hiding from her. Were you afraid that she would see you? No. Chao Gui forced himself to be calm. Ma Hualong looked at him again and changed the topic. This city is really spectacular. It's completely different from what I've seen before. Indeed. Chao Gui nodded. Although he had focused most of his attention on the little princess, he was still amazed by the size of the city, the magnificence of the buildings, and the spaciousness of the space. This place was different from all the cities he had seen before. In the minds of these students, cities should be like the Yun Nation or Great Xia, including Lan City. Although there were some differences, there wasn't much of a difference. However, this place was completely different as it belonged to the future. Although they didn't have the concept of science fiction and the future world, standing here gave them a feeling that this wasn't a city that belonged to the present. Everyone walked along the road. After a while, he let them stop to rest and let them take a look at the buildings on the side. All the students dispersed. Even some of the deans couldn't help but walk to the front of the buildings to take a closer look. Chao Gui hid behind someone for fear that the girl who was running around would see him. There were 2 times when she ran to the back of the group of students, which scared him so much that his heart almost jumped out. Who's that girl? She came with Xiao Prince Consort, but she looks about 10 years old. She shouldn't be the princess, right? Ma Huolong asked casually as he looked around after entering a certain building. I don't know. I don't know her. Qiao Gui was afraid that Ma Huolong would see through him. If others knew about what happened that day, he wouldn't be able to face anyone. The two of them walked around the building and even climbed up the stairs, only to see that it was filled with rooms. The two of them were dizzy from walking around. They were used to houses and couldn't understand the layout of this kind of building. An Earthling would be able to tell at a glance that this was a house type designed in the style of Earth. Each house had 3 bedrooms, 1 living room, 1 bathroom, and 1 kitchen. It was about 100 square meters. There were a few types of buildings in the city. The first type was for the commoners in the outer ring. Ren Baqian was going to give them away for free. As long as they moved into the new city, he would give them one. When young people got married, he would give them another one. At the very least, after 10 or 20 years, he would consider selling the houses. As for the residences in the inner ring, they were allocated by the Empress to the officials in the imperial court. The only residential areas for sale were the high-end residential areas between the outer ring and the inner ring. They were all single-family villas, which were prepared for businessmen. Just as the two of them reached the 3rd floor, they saw 2 people jumping in through the window. When Qiao Gui saw who they were, his entire body stiffened. He wanted to hide, but the other party saw him clearly. Honeysuckle jumped through the window and saw the 2 of them in the room. She didn't pay much attention to them, but Qiao Gui's stiff and evasive behavior caught her attention. When she saw that face, she was suspicious at first. Her body moved and she scurried in front of him. She stared at him and rolled her eyes. I think I've seen you before. You must have mistaken me for someone else. Qiao Gui covered his face with one hand. I seem to have smelled this before. Honeysuckle sniffed and became even more suspicious. Let me take a look at your face. Your Highness, what's the matter? Zhu Hua crossed her arms and curiously sized up the 2 of them. She glanced at the ugly Ma Huolong and stared at Qiao Gui. She frowned and said, Why are you evading my gaze? Something's wrong. No, you must have mistaken me for someone else. Qiao Gui replied. Take your hand down. Zhu Hua said in a deep voice. I'm too ugly. I'm afraid I'll scare the 2 of you. As Qiao Gui spoke, he took his hand down. Ma Huolong turned his head and almost spat. He saw that Qiao Gui's eyes were big and small, and his mouth was crooked to one side. He looked like an idiot. Do you think I'm a fool? Zhu Hua didn't say anything else and struck him with her palm. I'm really ugly. Qiao Gui's body floated backward. However, just as he dodged Zhu Hua's palm, his clothes were pulled by someone. Honeysuckle tugged at his clothes and became even more suspicious. I've definitely seen you before. You must have mistaken me for someone else. Ma Huolong admired Qiao Gui's ability to maintain his crooked mouth and eyes when he spoke. Honeysuckle sniffed and sniffed again and again. Then, he came to a realization. You're the one who made the bet that day. Qiao Gui was scared out of his wits. Cold sweat dripped down his back as he denied repeatedly, You've mistaken me for someone else. Zhu Hua sneered. How dare you lie to Her Highness? Do you want me to bring you to Prince Consort Qiao? Qiao Gui could only smile bitterly. If this matter was brought to Prince Consort Qiao, he wouldn't be able to show his face anymore. His expression returned to normal. He looked down at Honeysuckle and smiled bitterly. Grandaunt, can you just pretend you didn't see me? Don't call me Grandaunt. Call me Father. Honeysuckle's eyes were sparkling and his face was full of joy. This was the first person who called him father. He was a little worried when he was brought back that day. What if he couldn't find him in the future? He didn't expect to find him so soon. Chao Gui's position in Honeysuckle's heart was very high, close to that of the roaring emperor. Ma Huolong almost choked when he heard Honeysuckle's words. His eyes widened. He already knew the identity of the person in front of him. She was the current princess who was said to be only 3 years old. However, what he was most curious about was the relationship between the current princess and Chao Gui. Seeing that he couldn't avoid it, Chao Gui made up his mind. The bet that day was settled that day. Ma Huolong immediately understood. Then, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Chao Gui had actually called the current princess father. And he had even lost the bet. This was simply too satisfying. However, thinking about it, Chao Gui didn't seem to have lost out. No, I didn't say that I would only call you father that day. If you call me father, I'll bring you to see my lord father. Honeysuckle rolled his eyes. He seemed to be very afraid when Zhu Hua wanted to bring him to see his lord father. Honeysuckle was young and inexperienced. He often did things that made people not know whether to laugh or cry. However, he was smart and immediately found the other party's weak point. Chao Gui's face turned red and twitched a few times. He knew that he would be done for if he was dragged to see Zhao Prince Consort. As long as what happened that day was exposed, he would become a laughingstock. He made up his mind and gritted his teeth. Father. Honeysuckle immediately beamed with joy. He raised his arm and patted Chao Gui's chest. His voice was like a drum. If anyone bullies you in the future, just say my name. Ma Huolong and Zhu Hua were laughing so hard that they almost cramped up. Ma Huolong was still able to hold it in, but Zhu Hua was laughing unrestrainedly. Tears were almost flowing out of her eyes. She had long known about Honeysuckle's bad habit. However, it was simply unheard of to see a scholar from the Yun nation being forced by Honeysuckle to call him father. Little ancestor, please let me go. Chao Gui looked aggrieved. His face was red, yellow, blue, and purple as if he was running a dye shop. Not little ancestor, call me father, Honeysuckle said stubbornly. Father, please let me go. Don't let anyone know that I still want to see people. Chao Gui was on the verge of tears. Why? You can't see people if you call me father. Honeysuckle was puzzled. It was fine for him to call his father that every day. Chao Gui spent a lot of effort to fool Honeysuckle away. The main reason was that Honeysuckle still had to continue his exploration and naturally wouldn't waste too much time here. After satisfying his wish of being called father, he continued to explore the place with a hop and a jump. Chao Gui looked at Ma Huolong with a livid face and cupped his hands. Brother Ma, please keep this secret. Ma Huolong held back his laughter with great difficulty. He patted Chao Gui's shoulder and said sympathetically, actually, it's nothing. If others knew, they would be envious. After all, this is a princess. Before he could finish speaking, Ma Huolong couldn't help but laugh so hard that his teeth were showing. Chao Gui covered his face and wished he could find a hole to hide in. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.